Hello there, dear listener. We hope you're enjoying this lovely discussion. If you're not already aware, this show is part of a podcast network called KWAZ Radio. A Pan-African Nationalist and Garveyite network come to showcasing the rich and varied thoughts of African people. We have an exciting lineup of shows that we think you'll enjoy, including
the Bitter Medicine Podcast.
I think black people require too much buy-in. Like, we constantly have to sell black people on things that are beneficial to black people.
The Pro-Black Perspective Podcast.
I'm fearful that our people are not really studying how to get ahead, and we're kind of, continually staying behind.
The Harsh Reality Podcast.
To me, it don't matter. I think people are so dumbed down, it wouldn't matter what you reveal to them. They still are in the matrix. They're in the simulation. They're going to keep doing what they did. They lemmings. So to me, it don't matter.
The Learning Curve Podcast.
Sexual access has never given you economic empowerment. The only person who has ever been economically empowered by a sexual relationship is the wasp and his woman.
The Cathedral Cheek Show.
When we start rising up to fight for our own, I guarantee you they'll stop doing what they're doing. I guarantee you they would have let their brother go. They was waiting to see what black folks was going to do.
Brother Bakari Podcast.
Black people love to claim folks that hate them, right? They are slave masters, and they are ashamed of who they really are.
The Forecast Radio.
Like, if you pray to the same deity as, like, your enemy, and that God blesses your enemy more than you may want to reconsider who you're praying to,
And Tanzan, African Mind.
Because generally are welcoming of everyone. Sometimes to my consternation, I think that they should be less, welcoming.
If you love our podcast network, we would be grateful if you could rate and review us on Apple Podcasts. Follow us on social media, like and subscribe to our YouTube channel, and check out our website at www.kwazradio.com for more information. Thank you for tuning in. And now, back to the program.
All right. Peace, family. I'm glad everybody could make it. 0 concurrent viewers, so I see some people not in yet. Matter of fact, let me give y'all some time to show up. I know some people, I don't know what y'all are doing, but I know some people, whatever. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna play custom, some of our music. We're gonna play some of the music, and we're just gonna see if anybody shows up when they hear the wonderful sounds of Hit the Road, Cracker.
Hit the road, cracker, and don't you come back no more, no more, no more, no more. Hit the road, cracker, and don't you come back no more. What you say? Hit the road, cracker, and don't you come back no more, no more, no more, no more. Hit the road, cracker, and don't you come back no more. Oh, Oni, don't you treat me this way. I'll be back on my feet someday. I don't care if you do, 'cause it's understood. You ain't got no wisdom, you're just a no good. Well, I guess if you say so, I have to pack my things and go. That's right, hit the road. Hit the road. Hit the road. Hit that road. Hit the road. Hit the road. Cracker. Hit that road. Hit that road. Hit the road. Hit the road. Hit the road.
Hit that road.
Cracker.
Okay, so not surprisingly, nobody joined after that. Actually, no, we got one. We got one concurrent viewer. So what I'm going to say is, obviously it makes kind of sense that nobody would. Actually, I was just typing something inside of X, Twitter. It's pretty interesting. some of the things that you start to see as you write books, as you research for books, is that you start to learn about what the African way was, you know, and as you learn how Africa used to be, uh, like you begin to realize where we went wrong, you know. So one of the things I'm talking about in on X on Twitter is marriage, and how essentially, you know, not just premarital sex but extramarital sex. These sort of ideas are taboo, or not that taboo. They are to be avoided. You're supposed to not do premarital sex. You're not supposed to do extramarital sex. But the complication there is, well, how could you not do premarital sex if it's instinctual, if it's hormonal, right? And the reality is that, you know, because my brother Keter, you know, you guys know Keter, brother from another mother, he asks, well, what age? And it's like, that's where it becomes uncomfortable for us in the Western world, because we're told, hey, look, you should get married when you're like, well, you should get married when you're like 18, 19, 20, 25, 30. You know what I mean? So if you're not supposed to have sex before you get married, you're not supposed to get sex. You're not supposed to have sex until you're 20, 25, 30. And that doesn't make any sense. But in traditional Africa, really, marriage was post-pubescent. But importantly, between people in the same age grade. Okay? Now, the question is, how do you make it so that it's between people in the same age grade? Because one, you want your son, like you want the husband to be able to provide for the wife, right? And you know, young people can't really provide for, young boys can't really provide, or can they? And that's where it comes into play that realistically, as a boy, you would have had your inheritance. You would have gotten an inheritance from your father when you became of age, or when you were interested in marriage, right? And that's the big difference, because and it's actually it's interesting because we read about Kenyatta last week, but it's very interesting because what Kenyatta's book tells you, and we don't have it in front of us right now, but what Kenyatta's book tells you is that actually, let me show you guys. I mean, I know it's a little bit of a tangent, because I know somebody out there is like, hey, I want to read about this article. Why are you talking about marriage and shit? I'm sorry, guys. It's like there's like one person in the chat. You know what I mean? like at some point you can't. You know, you could. I mean, you know, like basically, I already know I'm not doing it right. You know, I already know I'm not doing it right. There's no sense in me pretending like I'm going to be doing it right. You know what I mean? I appreciate you for coming through. I appreciate you for stopping by. Just feel the vibe. You know, this podcast is really a vibe. It's not whatever it is that, you know, you'd want it to be. Let me see if I can remember this book. What was the name of that book? Oh yeah, Kenyatta's something about Earth or something. I'm just looking through my book collection. So if you guys don't know, there's like a whole bunch of free books you can get if you join the Discord. Okay? So make sure you join the Discord. And as you join the Discord, you know, you'll come to my archive. And so, yeah, so I don't have the book here. I have it on the Discord. Not on the Discord, but on the, what do you call it? Let's see. I guess the drive. I know you're like, yo, why don't you just link your drive then? And then we don't have to engage you in blah, blah, blah. That's very true. But I don't want to do it. So anyway, Kenyatta wrote a book called what? Something about like Mount Kenya, I think. For some reason, it's incredibly hard to find in my like I was just reading it 2 days ago, and it's really, really hard to find for some reason, which is actually kind of weird. But I think it's like Mount Kenya. It's actually odd. Okay, facing Mount Kenya. So I found it, and actually I'll show you guys what it looks like. This screen looks way too big though. Why is it so big? Let me fix the screen too. That's weird because I fixed it right before we. That's actually really weird. All right. Hit the road, cracker. All right. So what we're gonna do though is I'm gonna show you guys. Well, hopefully this works. I didn't even try this one out. All right. You know what I'm gonna do? I'm just gonna do it this way. So 20. I think it's this. No, it's not that. Rethinking Mount Kenya. Search result Google Drive. Okay, so this is the Google Drive. Oh, actually, that's kind of dangerous to show off. Hold on a second. Let me just try to do this a little better. I'm sorry. It like sometimes the thought just occurs to you because I was like I said I was legit just replying to my brother Keter, and so you have this book, and I think this is kind of important. No, it's not really related. I can't even. Wait, what the crap? I thought I changed the screen. Okay, so anyway, so let's see. Let me just double check that the screen is being shared. Yeah, alright. So what this guy says at some point is he's talking about how socialism is not real, and maybe the word settlement. Maybe the settlement is owing to the land settlement. I wish I remember the name of it. Peaceful settlement of the land they possessed according to Gikuyu custom. Every family, full settlement. So it wouldn't be this. Let me see if maybe he uses the word inheritance. I don't think he does, but okay, let's just look up inheritance. Inheritance, the first acquiring hunting lands. So women do not inherit land on the father's side. They play their part in the family or clan. They marry. So to return to the analysis, the sons following their two wives, cultivation. But basically, what he's saying, I think this might be it. Yeah, what he's saying is this: that a father, because he's talking about private ownership. He's like, for example, a man whom we'll call A bought land before he was married. Sorry. All right. When he married, land became the joint property of husband and wife. In this case, we'll assume A had no relatives. He cleared a part of his land for his wife. Then part cultivated for his wife became her own, while the soil still remained the property of the husband. Right. So really, it's just the husband's land, but he doesn't really mess with her garden. Right. Let us say that man had 60 acres. The first wife might have cultivated 2 acres. She would have. So now he's saying if he had a second wife, he would give her some land too. Now each wife had her garden. Blah 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 blah. As the family increased, let us imagine that each had 3 sons and perhaps 1 daughter. But as female children do not take part in the ownership of land, we will leave them out. Because having no system of spinsterhood in the Gikuyu, a woman did not inherit land on their father's side. Because there was no spinsterhood. Okay? I gotta actually write that word down. In fact, let me see if I could even... See, because this is the kind of research that you have to do if you want to write a book about, everything, is that you want to... So I'm just going to take a note of this. Because because as you could tell, it's really hard to find things after you lose them. You just can't find it. All right, so anyway, turn to our analysis. Mr. A, the sons, following their father's example, married 2 wives. In this way, the land which used to be the private property of the father, Mr. A, and of which he had absolute ownership, was now shared by several persons who had full cultivation rights, namely the father, his 2 wives. So basically, long story short, they don't split the land after the father dies, right? Which is what we do, or what they do in America, right? What they do is the father splits the land while the kids are alive. Okay? And now this young person, now here's the thing that, it doesn't say the guy's age, but let's just pretend this young person, the son, he could be 12. He could be 16. Now, I'm not recommending 12 or 16, but what I'm saying is he could be 16. And then he would still be competitive, or he could still provide for a wife, even though he's only 16.
or even though he's 14 or some shit, or 12, I don't know, right? The point is that he has enough resources that he could now provide for a woman. Whereas if he's waiting for his father to die or whatever, his father might die at 80. Okay? If we're optimistic, right? 80, 90, whatever. He'll be 70, 60. And then he'll get his father's land. Then he'll get something from his father. Get something significant from his father. That's the big difference that really comes to it. So it's like, when you say something like somebody's getting married at 12 or 16 or 18, you might say, ew, gross. And I agree. Like part of me, again, because I'm westernized too, I could say, ew, how could you get married so young, right? But again, that comes from two different aspects. One is that we assume, hey, you should have sex with people without marrying them. You should have sex outside of your marriage, right? And the other part is that we assume, so like we all believe, hey, you know what? A young man and a young woman should, like they should go out into the world and work for this white man. You get what I'm saying? Now, the Kikuyu, like he says, they had no system for spinsterhood. So, essentially, I'll put it this way. Essentially, in the West, we are training women to be spinsters. Right? And then when they are spinsters, we're like, well, why the hell are you a spinster? Why don't you get married? You see what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying? It's just that simple. It's like we're training women to be spinsters, and then when they become spinsters, we're like, what's the problem? And we're training people to say, let's have free sex. Let's have sex outside of, commitment. Let's have sex outside of marriage. And then we're like, well, why is there so many diseases? Why are there so many single parents? Why are there so many children without family? Like so on and so forth. It's like you gotta at some point look at the culture that you're fostering. But anyway, that was a really, really, really big tangent. Let's see who's here. Brother Bakari's here. He says peace and black power. Peace. Real Black Gentleman's here. He says good morning. And Bit of Medicine podcast is here. He says peace. So I appreciate all three of you. I'm going to check the chat to see if there's anybody else. But, it's actually a really, profound discussion that I didn't even know. Because as you guys know, when I went to Tanzania, I was very far from, abstinence. Very far from celibacy. I think I might have had the most amount of sex I've had in my life. In that short amount of time I was in there. But, for good reason. I think that, obviously I'm not 12. I'm not 16. I'm pushing 30. Okay. No, I'm not pushing 30. I'm pushing 40. Right? So, pushing 40, I'm way too old to not be married. Now, granted, I was married before, and that didn't work out because, a large part was kind of like what I'm outlining. You're going into marriage, like essentially you're marrying somebody who. I shouldn't tell anything bad about his mother, but I wasn't trained to be a husband, and she wasn't trained to be a wife. Okay, but one of the good things about Africa and African women is that a lot of them are training to be wives. Okay? A lot of them are training to be wives. And so you're going to, essentially being with an African woman, you're going to man up. Like I'll tell you this, even when you're having what they call casual sex, right? A lot of women are reasoning, hey, you know what? The man's the leader, and the man should protect, and the man should provide. A lot of women are reiterating this, even in casual sex in situations. It's pretty interesting. It's pretty interesting to say the least. And I say this to say that because essentially we can make Africa better. Okay? I don't want to say make Africa great again. Or y'all gonna say MAGA. But we can make Africa better. For sure. But all that said, let's get into the article. So we have people now, right? We have people now. Before it was 0 people, now we have people. And I know people are on the playback, like, hey, but I'm listening on the playback. Come on, you're not on the playback.
I've seen the playback numbers. There's no playback. You know, like this is it. All right. What kind of language is Swahili? And by the way, I'm just joking. Come on, have some humor, okay? Introduction. Recently, we've seen the appearance of an interesting and provocative book on the Swahili. This book by Ali Amin Mazrui and Ibrahim Noor Sharif. Now, again, these are two Arab names, right? Takes a serious look at the question of Swahili identity and origins. This paper has at least two goals. One is to help define the nature of the debate about origins, and in so doing, I will explicate and critique the Mazrui and Sharif hypothesis. The second is to reiterate the theme of the study of Swahili by Derek Nurse and the present author, 1993, entitled Swahili and Sabaki, A Linguistic History. Hereafter, N and H. So he's Hindenburg, and this is Nurse. So he calls you guys. So instead of writing out his own fucking name, he's like, I'm H. All right. So the linking of Swahili and Sabaki in the title was deliberate. The history of Swahili is inextricably intertwined with that of Sabaki, and we cannot speak of the former without direct reference to the latter. So here's actually a pretty interesting thing, idea of Sabaki. I want to tell you guys this. So I sometimes do this thing called Duolingo. Duolingo, I try to do it. I have like a long streak. I did miss like 3 days, 4 days, but it allows you some streak protection. Some of you guys want that, right? Anyway, but it allows you some streak protection. Let me see how far. I think I have like 477 days. Yeah, 477 days. So, like, I was like in Tanzania when I first downloaded it. So I was in Tanzania 477 days ago. But what I could say is this. I got to this chapter. I think it's like section 3 or something like that. They keep reorganizing it. Unit 3, where you start talking about science and tourism. Said differently. Actually, I think they have some examples here. So, no, I didn't have enough examples. But basically, they started talking about neutrons and protons and electrons and that kind of stuff. I mean, because for whatever reason, you need to know that stuff. Or elements. And here's the trouble. To say proton in Swahili, protoni. To say electron, electroni. To say neutron, neutroni. To say, what was the other one I said? Something else. Now, not all of them are like that. You know, to say hypothesis was a little bit, complicated. To say, science is sciency. But the point is that it was very, 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 very rich in loan words, to put it lightly. So I would talk about that in the book. But basically, I think Africanizing Swahili is the way to go. Like, obviously, I'm pretty sure the article is going to be about how this is an African language, and that's fine. I don't dispute that Swahili is an African language. But I do think that we use way too many damn loan words. And I do think that how the Yoruba handle new words is actually pretty insightful. And I heard that from quite a few people, so I'm not really too mad at that. Let's see if I have any comments. Photoni. Well, they don't use Y, but yeah, it probably is photoni. And it's kind of like, like, why you can't just... But, I mean, I get it. Like I said, the Yoruba... They do it really well where they create a new word, like kind of like Latinized. So the way how, like proton probably in Latin means like positive. I don't know what non would be, but or ton would be neutron. Yeah, but like positive, so on and so forth. Electron would be. I don't know why electron would be. Electron would probably not be negative, but it could be that. Electron might mean like tiny particle, tiny electric particle, and then they found out later, the proton is positive and the electron is negative, but they didn't retroactively change the word. But the point is that if you can, with a greater understanding, name things differently, the same with regard to carbon. They said carboni. Now you can make it so that carbon means something else, or you could just say it's the sixth element. Right? Because people might have found out hydrogen and oxygen were whatever before they realized that it was the first element and the, I don't remember, 13th element maybe? I don't know. 14th? 4th? Or, no, oxygen? I don't remember.
But I don't remember which one it was. But and I'm saying that and I'm like, damn, because I know Koku's probably like, Oxford is this one. Okay, all right. We forgot, man. We're not all in the field. All right. So anyway, but yeah. So yeah, the language is kind of crappy, in that respect. But it is what it is. So he says the paper is divided into several sections. The first reviews the position taken by Mazrui and Sharif. The second discusses the views of N and H implicit in their work on Sabaki, that Swahili is an integrated development from its African heritage, the Sabaki languages. Finally, a critique of the Mazrui and Sharif hypothesis will conclude the paper. So I might actually include this in my book, the Sabaki thing, because I did talk about Swahili, and how much I don't like that aspect to it. And I didn't know about the Sabaki thing. And shout out to Trigger Happy, 2+2, 2 plus 2, I think maybe. I don't remember the numbers at the end, but shout out to that brother. He's the one who linked this, I think, last week on Shoot the Breeze. So we were on Bit of Medicine's podcast, and he linked it on Shoot the Breeze. And Real Black Gentleman said he read it yesterday too. So shout out to Real Black Gentleman for being here. All right. So the Mazrui and Sharif hypothesis, and I know that thing's mad loud. Mazrui and Sharif, hereafter M&S, guy likes to do that, presents an interesting proposal for the origin of Swahili. They speculate based on their reading of the Periplus of the Erythraean Sea, a first-century document written by an early Greek traveler to East African territories, that the Swahili language developed from the pidgin of Arabic, that is, one whose basic vocabulary was drawn from Arabic. So that's pretty interesting. They say some Greek traveler to East African territories that the Swahili language developed, that thought that the Swahili was a pidgin of Arabic, which is pretty interesting, in retrospect, because we talk about pidgins today, and we don't really think about ancient Greek people, I guess. Maybe not ancient Greek, first century Greek people traveling to East Africa, and being, familiar with Arabic and so on and so forth. But, it's actually, because the whole world happened already, most of the world happened, but listen, since much of the discussion in this paper rests on Nurse and Hinnebosch, that's him, and I want to acknowledge Derek Nurse's contribution to the paper. Much of his work and analysis is incorporated here, and I'm indebted to him. The present discussion and interpretation are my own. The book is one of several that have recently appeared that deal with Swahili history and identity, and which to some extent discuss the role of language and or linguistics to shed light on the concept of identity. Yeah, and if you guys hear something loud in the background, that's my heat. What can I tell you? America's cold. America's cold and my radiator is way too high. So anyway, their reconstruction can be summarized as follows. By approximately 100 AD, Arab travelers are present on the East African coast. In order to facilitate communication, and that's pretty interesting, the Arabs were already in East Africa. That's 2,000 years now. You see what I'm saying? That's roughly 2,000 years. They were already in, and this was before Islam. You see what I'm saying? Because Islam is like 700, so 600 years later. But these Arabs were already in East Africa. They were in East Africa before us, us West Africans, right? And I'm just messing. So anyway, in order to facilitate communication with inhabitants along the coast, an Arabic-based pidgin developed. But the acrolect, Arabic, only provided lexicon and no grammar. Its grammar was based predominantly on primary universal patterns. They are unclear to what extent the Basilex Bantu languages provided non-lexical structure. So I'm not 100% sure what a lexicon is at this point. I think that's the words. So they're saying the Arabs provided words but no grammar, right? And but the Bantu had the grammar. And that's something that most of us already heard. I think that Swahili follows a Bantu grammar, but it has a lot of loan words. And so you kind of see, like what I just said, carboni, protoni, electroni. But at the same time, it's like, would you say it's English? No. Would you say it's a pidgin of English? No. You know what I mean? So the Arab-speaking traders began to intermarry and produce offspring who initially learned the pidgin, which then in the normal course of many pidgins developed into a Creole. Decreolization occurs as a function of contact and associated with substratum languages, Bantu languages. Swahili, as we know it today, developed. So
the idea is that it was first a pidgin, just words, afia, health, whatever, and then it became a Creole, and then eventually it became a language. Which is, again, it is a possibility in real life. I mean, I don't think it happened, but it is a possibility in real life. I see Bit of Medicine had a comment, but it deleted. I don't know. So I can't really say anything about it. Maybe it was about what element oxygen was. All right. So anyway, so they recognize that it is very difficult to adduce any linguistic evidence for the Swahili genesis. So they're like, look, there's no evidence that this happened. One outcome of decreolization is the effect that a decreolized language will have lost all traces of its Pidgin and Creole genesis. Subsequent linguistic methodology and the comparative method will identify the decreolized language with one or more of the substratum languages and would be unable to detect its Pidgin Creole origins. As evidence, they state that the hypothesis would certainly explain Swahili's substantial proportion of Arabic words, its lack of a tonal system that is characteristic of virtually all other neighboring African languages, and the fewer distinctions in its concord system. We will return to the end of the paper to examine some of these claims in light of the following presentation of aspects of Swahili grammatical structure. So, what's interesting here is these stuff. He's like, hey, look, it lacks a tonal system. I don't know that. That's the thing. I'm not a linguist, so I don't even know what that means. So he says, Swahili, a different kind of Bantu language. While observers have recognized that Swahili is a Bantu language, this recognition has usually developed as a consequence of long, distinct comparisons between Swahili and a general notion of what constitutes a Bantu language typologically. Some have remarked on the fact that Swahili has absorbed huge amounts of foreign loans, often concluding that Swahili is lexically quite unlike other Bantu languages. And I want to be clear, though. English also has a lot of loan words, right? In fact, some I guess it's like some douche in France was like, English is just a dialect of French or something like that, or like English is just I don't know, like a pidgin of French or something. And again, possibly. But like a lot of loan words are in English, because like just remember all those words that we're talking about, proton, neutron, like it's kind of the same bullshit. It's the Latin, you know what I mean? It's not really English, and that kind of stuff. But it is what it is. I think they even said like it might be like 70% foreign. But of course, like most of the foreign words are European, but some of them aren't. Like yams and that kind of stuff. Maize, corn. So the result has been a string of quite... I don't know if corn. I don't know. I just said it. The result has been a string of quite odd and ambivalent characterizations of Swahili, some of which are critiqued by Mazrui and Sharif. The focus in this section is to show that Swahili is not atypical, either linguistically or sociolinguistically. Moreover, that it's developed out of a very specific Bantu matrix. Any discussion of Swahili origins that purport to contribute to the debate of what kind of language Swahili is or who the Swahili are must take this into account. This was indeed the implicit, if not overt, conclusion of Nurse and basically himself. Most Swahili dialects are no more different from other Sabaki languages than the latter are from each other. The view espoused there and in the article is that Swahili is only a different kind of Bantu language to the extent that the Sabaki languages and their matrix, the Northeast Coast Bantu languages, all Swahili's nearest linguistic neighbors, are different kinds of Bantu languages. Swahili, beyond the specific character of its lexicon, is no more a special case than other Sabaki and NEC languages. So he just said the same thing twice. And I'm just reminded about how some people like my brother Kamjiverse, it's kind of like, why would you use Bantu, as a word? But it is what it is, right? Recognize that Swahili is classified as a Bantu language less because of its vocabulary, but more because of its grammatical structure. And that's the thing. Even with its lexicon, Swahili is as typical as any other language that has a history of contact with other languages. Examples are many, but I mentioned just three: Persian and Turkic languages with massive Arabic loaning, in the comparable case of English with Romance and other loans. Yeah. So basically what he's saying is that Persian and Turkic borrow from Arabic, and as well, and English borrows from Romance languages, like Roman languages and all that kind of stuff. And I think it's, and of course we're kind of like idealistic sometimes. We're like, hey, but you should borrow from African languages type shit, right? Yeah, true. But here's the thing. Here's the thing that you're gonna see in this. Why Arabic? Why English? Right? And then even if you go before that, why Egypt at one point? Right? Because those were the world powers. You know what I mean? Those were the superpowers of their day. So when, and I don't know, I mean, obviously Arabic was not a superpower in 100 AD, but of course, you know, they eventually do become a freaking superpower. Like, a lot of us don't understand how powerful the Arabs were at one point, but essentially, I think it's from 711 to 1492, they colonized Southern Europe. Okay, so the Portuguese and the Spanish, the ones that we don't like, obviously for obvious reasons, they start off the quote unquote enslavement of Africans. I was gonna say slave trade, quote unquote, but enslavement of Africans, right? They start off that's why I said quote unquote, but they were being colonized and enslaved by the Arabs. Okay, this is how massive these people were, and this is just 700 years. So a lot of us look back and we're like, hey man, we were enslaved for 400 years. And it's not even 400 years technically, but you know, we were like, oh, we were enslaved for 400 years. They were enslaved for 700 fucking years. And that was by the Arabs. So it's like, yeah, the Arabs, they were not a fucking joke. Like, and so yeah, you might get some like, and then now today with the Americans are not a joke. You know, as much as yeah, the Americans are not a joke. Even today. Like, we might look at Americans and be like, damn, y'all are so incompetent. Why are you electing some, you know, one old fool versus another old fool? You guys are so stupid. Look at your senators. They're making stupid TikTok joke. Ha, ha. Right? America still is one of the leading nations on the planet. Even with all its stupid leadership, it's still one of the leading nations on the planet. To the point where a lot of the things that you're interested in, technology-wise, science-wise, even though they're like a bunch of idiots normally, they are like they're in the top tier of engineers on the planet, of scientists on the planet. You know what I mean? So it's like, yeah, you're gonna especially if you're looking to have some sort of scientific know-how or engineering know-how, you might not get that from, you know, your neighbor who's just as unscientific or just as you know, lacking in engineering as you are. And you might say, well, no, a lot of us had some good engineers. We built this, we built bridges, and yeah, we did. We did brain surgery. Yeah, we did all that kind of stuff. But there are things that we didn't do. Like, we didn't construct the airplane. We didn't put the wires under the ocean to create the internet and kind of stuff like that. We didn't do those things. You know? So even though I agree with you know, the idea of, oh, why don't you just make a word for whatever you see? That's fine. I get that. But I also understand if you're having a long contact with another language, you might pick up on it. The same way how, like, me, I'm an old ass motherfucker, right? But I might say cap. You know, why do I say cap? Because, you know, you pick up on slang. In fact, just recently, the new slang is Riz. You know? So, like, Riz is when, like if you watch a TikTok video for 2 seconds or whatever, you know, you scroll through whatever, you know, you'll pick up on young people now saying, oh, man, he rizzed her up. Oh, man, she got that Riz. You know, like, what are you talking about? Or gyat. You know what I mean? Like, gyat is just like,
God dang, you know what I'm saying? like a girl got a nice body, you like, God dang, you know what I'm saying? But like they made "gyat" the word for ass. In fact, my son, well, I don't know why, but he thinks that the word for butt is "gyat" now. You know what I mean? Not that I say it that much, but but that's how that's how it is. So you're gonna pick up on words, and then you're going to share those words. So if you're in contact with other people, you're gonna pick up on what they call computer. So like the word for Swahili and the word for computer in Swahili is computer. So you're gonna pick up somebody walking around, oh yeah, I'll just bring my computer over here, bring my computer over here, bring my computer over here, and then most people are gonna call it a computer, right? And you might say, no, we should sit back and wait for the big guy upstairs, whoever, the government to tell us that no, you don't call it a computer, you call it ikoleko, right? I don't know. All right, you call it Econoko because eco means, no, right? They're going to call it a computer. And then it's going to become the common language, and it's going to be accepted inside the language at some point. Now, I do think there should be some resistance, but what I'm saying is that, you're talking about a time before time. You're talking about people outside of our ideologue, ideology. You're talking about people outside of our ideology. So what they're going to do is going to be different from what you're going to do. You know what I mean? People outside of your ideology, for the most part, are going to do things differently from you. Right? And if you're not spreading your ideology, well, that's on you. So let's see. Some people here, it says Crimson Nebula. Shout out to Crimson Nebula. I don't know if I've seen the fam before, but I appreciate you. It says by Arabs, not Africans. Colonized by the El Andalus was colonized by Arabs. We got Eli Wananda here. So no guys, so y'all go check out Eli Wananda. I was actually watching him the other day. He's reading through Blueprint for Black Power. Really, he's really been doing it forever. Because I was like, that book is way too big to be doing a read through. But he's like, nah, I'm doing a read through. So yeah, he's been reading it, and of course I've been writing like 1 million comments. So, and I might have slowed down some stuff, so hopefully he don't return the favor. But yeah, peace to my brother Ali Wananda. He says, Salama, bro. Finally got to join one of your lives. Well, appreciate it, man. And then Crimson Nebula says institutions. Yeah, exactly. If you really wanted to fix the language, you're going to need to get into those institutions. And those institutions have to be interested in fixing the language. So what happens is the Yoruba have an invested interest in keeping their language sounding African. The Swahili institutions probably anyone non here besides you trying to favor. No. Anyway, but yeah, the Swahili seem to probably be a little bit more friendly, let's say the least. Less hostile to loan words. And I do think that we should be hostile to loan words, but not everyone's going to do that. So, but what you can do, and what I propose for my own book, is that you take the base of Swahili and then you get the lexicon from other African languages. You get the lexicon from other African languages, or you develop and build language in the way that the Yoruba do. Okay? And I don't know, maybe I could even, just because you guys are so nice, or just because we got some people, whatever. I'll show you guys what I mean. So in Yoruba, we have, let me see if I can find it. I can't show you guys this stuff because, everything is whatever. But he says, I think I wrote here, it says, Kiswahili can adopt its own language or its relatives to create words. Another task outside of an individual scope, right? Yoruba, for instance, popularly calls a television either televisionu, right? Which is obviously, television. Or preferably, ero amohunmaworan, right? The latter meaning machine, ero, that produces sound and images, right? Produces sound and images. So the point is that, television becomes ero amohunmaworan, right? Whereas, like let's say a car might be ero and then, machine that,
transports people, or a machine that moves quickly, whatever. The point is, you got to know what the function of something is, and then use your own language, right, to create a word for it, and that's what the Yoruba do. So again, they do have that telefisionu, right, but they also have ero ama hun maoran, so it's pretty interesting. I thought I probably should have had more than one example, honestly. Whereas Kiswahili, they call it televisheni, right? Which is like it's obviously nonsense. You know what I mean? And I say, for instance, I write here, it says Kiswahili, which calls television televisheni, could learn from the Yoruba example or even the English example, since television means television, where tele means at a distance and vision means vision, right? I don't know what vision means, right? But it's like the idea is that, at a distance images, right? So the Yoruba look at it as machine that produces sound and images, and television, and the English use it as, looking at an image from a distance, right? Yeah, exactly. Like Real Black Gentleman says, Yoruba has witty nomenclature. Yeah, and so the thing is that as you get farther along in understanding something, because like the original televisions didn't have sound. You know what I mean? That's why that's part of the reason why you had silent movies. You know what I'm saying? Right? Because they couldn't play sound, or they had to play sound separate. Whatever. So it's like when they named it, it was at a time when it didn't produce sounds. But when the Yoruba came across the television, it already had sounds. So then they named it after something that produces sound and images. But so even for us, because like for like, let's say if you were to say, well, what is a television really? I might say it's just a propaganda box. Machine that produces propaganda. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's all it is. No, just messing. Some people call it television. The idiot box. Some people call it that. But whatever. Eli Wananda is gonna get me in trouble. He says Sophie Oluwole has a video somewhere arguing that the Yoruba term is much more accurate than the English Germanic term. Yeah. Well, I mean, again, I think partly because when the English created television, or not the English created it, but when the Americans, I guess, I don't know, maybe not just Americans, but whoever, like you said, it might be the Germans or whatever. When they created it, it did not produce sound. You know what I mean? It's kind of like a camera. Like, cameras don't produce sound. But at some point, we added, not we, but they added audio to the television. And so when the Yoruba see it, then it's like they can't just say it produces images alone. It produces sound too. But I think that's part of why it's more accurate, because the modern television is different from the first television. Because you need to name something the first time it appears, not like, like 50, 100 years later, because the person who created it, never saw, like, they never saw the television that we have. They saw, we can make images, thing, the tell live vision. Yep, that's it. They just tell lies. Anyway, let me get out of here. Let me see. All right, so the Sabaki matrix. So the language and how we distinguish them. In NNH, the evidence and reasoning for reconstructing Proto-Sabaki is laid out, as well as a justification for considering Swahili a Sabaki language. Both lexical statistics, hereafter LS. This guy does a whole bunch of acronyms, and the comparative method are relied on to reconstruct the proto-matrix from which Swahili and its other sister languages evolved. Earlier work in partially NNH established a linguistic context from which Sabaki itself developed, namely the northeastern coastal Bantu languages. It's out of this group that Sabaki, along with Ceuta, Shambhala, Bonde, etc., and Ruvu, Luguru, Zaramo, Gogo, plus Pare developed. Lexical statistics, so that's like statistics for lexicon, and lexical studies have been important for characterizing in specific, measurable, and testable terms the lexis of Swahili. CB has been crucial for specifying the precise terms how Swahili developed and evolved from its matrix. So this is actually pretty interesting because, like I said, I did look into some of the words in Swahili, and a lot of them are pretty close to the, like other language groups, like how they might say, like, "Oh, I like you" or some shit. It's pretty close to how thing looks. Let me see if I can actually open this video in my phone so that I can have a better eye on the chat, because usually I don't have the phone open. Now the only problem is that allow YouTube to send me the notifications. This brother gonna have me in trouble. All right, so within Sabaki, we can demarcate several distinct groups as well as individual languages which make up the division. Within Sabaki, we can demarcate several distinct groups as well as individual languages which make up the division. Some of the Sabaki groups, such as Swahili, Mijikenda, Comorian, and Pokomo, are either dialect clusters or dialect continua. The other members, Mwani, Mwina, and Ilwana, are single languages with minor dialect divergence, if any. For greater detail, see Appendix 2, or the reader can consult NNH. And, this is the thing that a lot of us don't pick up on, that language is very organic. In fact, here's the thing. Here's the trouble that we don't understand about language, right? Or we generally don't understand about language. The reason why English is static is because there are big nations that use English and try to force it to be static. Okay? They try to force it to be static. But normally, languages diverge. Like, normally, languages diverge. It's only when you have big nations that force static that they really become static. And it's only really, I would say, when you either have, strong literature or even not literature, but I feel like audio recordings really started to staticize language. You know what I'm saying? I think audio recordings really started to staticize language. And the reason why I'm saying this is this. One time I was, like I said, I had an elder who was in the, Pan-African movement. And her daughter would sometimes, stop by. Now, her daughter was an older lady because this elder was an elder, right? But her daughter sounded so fucking weird when she spoke. Okay? So she would say, let's say we're continuing to read this. And I can't really do it, but let's see. She's like, the Swahili continuum. Swahili is spoken along a 1,000-mile East African coastal strip and offshore islands, etc. It is subclassified into two groups. There is a northern dialect group, hereafter, and D. Because, I can't do it. But my point is this. It sounds so fucking different from how I'm talking. Right? Right? But what she was telling me was that she studied journalism. Like telejournalism. Like TV journalism. Okay? And in TV journalism, what they do is they teach you to take the... in America, they teach you to take the... what do you call it? Midwestern accent. Okay? So if you want to show up on television, you're supposed to have the Midwestern accent. Okay? And it's just a deliberate thing that America is doing. So when you turn on CNN, you understand what they're saying. Now, on the flip side, they could have had a Southern accent. And you could probably think Brother Bakari, but maybe Brother Bakari to the extreme. Right? Because there's a lot of people inside of this world, inside of America, where you're not going to understand what the fuck they're saying. And I'm not just talking about, black Southerners. It could be like the hillbillies or the actually the Missouri accent or the Louisiana accent. I don't know if I could even pretend to do it, but let me say then a northern dialect group hereafter and D consisting of Tiku, something stupid like that. I don't know. But I know I sound like something, or Jamaicans will sound different too. But my point is this: you could, somebody could read this, and it would be completely unintelligible to us. Also known as Bajoni Sul
Pate, Amu, mainly spoken in the Lamu archipelago and surrounding areas of northern Kenya, or whatever, right? My point is that accent that I was just doing, which is, it wasn't that bad, but you can't do that on television. You can't do that. You can't go on CNN. You can't go on MSNBC. You can't go on C-SPAN or whatever with that accent. Now, that accent is, like, many people in America have that accent. But if you're trying to get, like, you're trying to be in an acting career, you're trying to do whatever, you speak like how I'm kind of like how I'm speaking right now. But not even how I'm speaking. You speak like a Midwesterner. So, like, you'll notice that when, because there's a lot of people who like, are unintelligible. But you'll notice that there are no movies with them. Or if there are movies with them, they're like pretty much not there. You know what I'm saying? Like they're not the main character. They're not the protagonist. You know what I'm saying? And that's just the reality. And so you also see this inside of England, where you could find people where they spoke what they call Cockney, where they're just saying like nonsense, like, oh, that's the cat's pajamas and whatever, right? But or like they're actually the exaggerated English accent that some of us think that English people have. So they're all, well, I don't know if they're, without the slang, they're like some poorly studied marginalized dialects, all of the latter spoken north and south of Mombasa. Or I can't do it. I know Ellie's here, that's why I'm using it, but south of Mombasa or in Mombasa itself. But anyway, but then there's the Queen's English that they call it, and that's the kind of English that like kind of forces the staticness of the English government. So that and of course I don't know if it's, I mean, of course they're related, they're family, they're a bunch of elites and all that kind of stuff. But so you don't necessarily need a recording, but the reality is that in order for a language to become really, really static, it will like you kind of probably need some sort of powerful group. Now when you go to Africa, you ask yourself which of these groups was the most powerful, right? Or which of these groups had power over the other, right? And Swahili, Mijikenda, Comorian, and Pokomo, Mwani, Mwini, and Ilwana, they didn't have, they likely didn't have much, great power, like, oh my gosh, let's all speak Swahili, let's all speak Mijikenda, right? They likely all had their own language and they all just spoke it differently, and then those languages kind of developed into different subgroups. And so you only really have and this is how we could actually fix Swahili, and this is why it's so important to know. You only really have a universal language when you have a powerful people. When you have a powerful people that can say, no, this is how you're supposed to speak it. But otherwise, like I say, slang comes up. Gyat becomes a word. Oh, that's cap becomes a word. You risen her up. That becomes a word. Or in Jamaica, we call it, we call batiman. Well, batiman's another word, but we call batiman fish. Some people don't know that. I didn't know that until I went to Jamaica the other day. But people were joking about it. I think I was like, let me get some fish. And they were like, ew, pause, man. Why do I want fish? And you're like, what? What's wrong with fish? No, I don't think it was me. I think somebody else wanted fish, because I don't want no damn fish. But anyway, my point is this, though, that fish would be like, homosexual, and it becomes a part of the language, but it might only become a part of the language in Mijikenda. Or like I just said, in Jamaica. It might only become a part of the language in Kingston or something. Or let's say Jamaica, or not even Jamaica. Let's say it becomes a language in Kingston and spreads out to other parts of the country, and then eventually it's picked up on, But the reason why Kingston, like the thing that we also got to figure is that Kingston's the major city in Jamaica, and so a lot of what they're saying in Kingston becomes the staple across the world in terms of in relation to Jamaicans, whereas what might be said in Trenchtown might not necessarily become the staple across things. So what happens with, again, you have Queen's English, you have the Midwestern accent. So let me see what Elion says, received pronunciation, and he says, it's the funniest ever thing to hear Americans trying English accents, LOL. So Method Man does a decent job, to be fair. Method Man, I thought I did a good job, Although, once upon a time I tried. Although I remember when I was in high school, some white boy,
I had two white classmates, and well, I had two. It was like a whole class of white folk. But one of the white boys was like, speak English, and the other one was like, I am speaking. Like, he's like, I am speaking bloody English. Now, of course, they're both Americans, but it's just such a stupid thing for somebody to be like, I am speaking bloody English. Right, that's probably a better English accent, right? Now I gotta try to do a good English. Although I heard that black people, because here's the thing. So in America, you could tell the difference between a black person and a white person on the phone. A white person would be like, "Hello, how are you doing? How are you doing? How is your heating system?" Right? And a black person would be like, "Hey, what are you doing? How you doing? How's your heating system?" Or I think the better example, because like sometimes you're on the subway and you pick up on it, where the white boy goes, "Stand clear of the closing doors, please." And then you have a black man who's like, "Stand clear of the closing doors, please." But the thing with England, I heard, as for me, from my ears, I couldn't tell the difference between, well, at least when I was younger, I couldn't tell the difference between a black person speaking in an English accent and a white person speaking in an English accent. But allegedly, black people in the UK feel like you can. And they also feel like there's a different accent for East London versus South London, North London, and West London. They also think it's a different personality with the words, which is pretty interesting. So, but of course, we're just talking about the Anglosphere, which is not that important. So anyway, let's go. The Swahili continuum. Swahili is, but yeah, they all sound the same to me. But Robert Carter says, "Stop hating on Southern." No, he didn't say that. What did he say? He said, "Stop hating on." I'm just messing. I feel like that, brother. They had his brother Desalines, I guess, who was just roasting people the other day. I might start doing that too, man. Let's start roasting black folks. The way how y'all sound like. No, just messing. Swahili continuum. Swahili is spoken along a 1,000-mile East African coastal strip and offshore islands, etc. It is subclassified into two groups. There is a northern dialect group, hereafter ND, consisting of Tiku, T, also known as Bajuni, Sioux, Pate, Amu, mainly spoken in the Lamu archipelago and surrounding areas of northern Kenya. Another part of ND, including Mvita, Jamvu, Chifundi, and some poorly studied marginalized dialects. All the later are spoken north and south of Mombasa and in Mombasa itself. So here's another important thing about Swahili. So allegedly, there's a difference between Kenyan Swahili and Tanzanian Swahili. And most people would say the Tanzanians speak the correct Swahili. And not that they really do, it's just that they are formalizing the Swahili. Even though they're doing a bunch of loan words, they're still formalizing Swahili to be like, this is the correct Swahili. And essentially they make it a point to say that the Kenyans don't really speak Swahili. Mostly because I'm guessing the Kenyans are more trying to use English, to be a more international contender. Whereas the Tanzanians are really firmly trying to hold on to Swahili. But at the same time, like I said, they let a bunch of loan words, so it's not the most serious divide. So anyway, so he says the other Swahili group, a southern set, hereafter SD. This has too many fucking acronyms. So he said the northern dialect is basically the Kenyans, right? And the southern dialect is basically the Tanzanians, right? It's made up of the dialects of Zanzibar and Pemba and the Tanzania coast. Unguja, Makunduchi, Tumbatu, Pembe, Vumba, and Umtangata. So what's interesting is that the lady I'm trying to, because I think everybody should get married. So the lady I'm trying to wife, she's actually from the Swahili coast, Tanzanian coast. Her people are called Tanga though. So I was just looking I was trying to find out if the Tanga was here, but it's not. That's why I was reading it so slowly. So look, here's a bunch of this stuff. Other East African groups to which NEC most closely fit genetically, such as the Southern Highlands, Hehe, Bena, will not be concerned us in the discussion. So one of the women I was dating in Tanzania was Hehe. The Hehe was like a war cry, and so what was pretty funny was that she tried to retell the history and brag about her ethnicity. You could call it tribe, you could call it ethnicity. She was trying to brag about her ethnicity, and she said, "We killed the German prime minister." And I'm like, the German prime minister? I don't believe that. So apparently she eventually she corrected herself to say that they killed the a German general. So basically, the Germans were fighting in Tanzania to colonize us, and the Hehe were one of the warrior people who tried to stop the German colonization effort. And one of the things that they celebrate and speak about to this day is how they killed one of the German generals. Although they might be retelling the story incorrectly and saying they killed the German prime minister. But it is what it is. But it's pretty interesting that that's why I said you can't be against tribalism. Like, you can't be against tribes because, like, even now she's like, this lady was like, hey, if she gets married, they're gonna teach her sex techniques, so that she could please her husband. And it's like there's it's very troubling what we've done as a people or as a community to where a lot of women are not going to get married, right? And it's not really us. It's kind of us, but it's not really us as much as it is. We are in this urban economy where we just don't earn enough, like at a young enough age, or at a time that our children are of age that we can we can give to them. You know what I mean? So, like, for instance, right now my son is 8, right? Let's say he wants to marry a woman within 5 years, which is not something that he would do. But we're talking about like traditional Africa. In traditional Africa, if he wanted to marry somebody in 5 years, like, he could. You know what I mean? Or you say to yourself, no, you can't marry some woman for 5 years. That's fine. That's understandable. Or even, let's not even say 5 years. Let's say like 8 years, like he's 16 or something, right? That's fine. The only trouble is this, right? He's 16. He's not gonna be ready. Now, that's responsibility for me as a man to say, hey, look, in 8 years, my son's gonna have this much. He's gonna have enough money to buy his own land and buy his own house. Which, in Africa, he technically would, right? Because I had enough money. So if I just multiply my money a bit, I could get him a house and all that kind of stuff, and he'll be good. If you get him a good career and he starts off working a good job but already has a house, he'll be good. That's what we used to do back in Africa. You can't do that shit today. Unless you have a lot of money saved up, you can't do that shit today. Now, granted, you might say, well, son, go to go to college, go to grad school, and then I'll give you a house. That's good too, right? But the reality is that most of us did not inherit anything from our parents. Because, one, you got to wait for your parents to die. And two, our parents are not looking out. They're more or less, like, the way how the Western society is, and I know it's a little tangent, but the way how the Western society is that it's like, hey, you're now an adult, get the fuck out of my house. You know what I mean? Now, in traditional Africa, it's, okay, you're now an adult, here's some money to build your own house. Like, here's something so that you could start your own house. But we're like, no, I gave you enough, get the fuck out of my house. And that's the big difference. That's the big difference. Because now you have people who are walking around, and again, the reason why you say, marriage at, let's say 16 or something, the reason why you say marriage at 16 is this, right? So this is the thing I noticed with my son. And I didn't really notice anything weird or anything, as much as I noticed, I started to do some predictions. Saying to myself this, because basically what happens is my son is 8, right? And his mother was like, this boy needs to wear some deodorant. He stinks. And I'm like, I don't smell him, right? But then eventually, I did, come next to his arm and I smelled him. And I'm like, damn, he's young, but he needs to start wearing deodorant, right? And it dawned on me, look, this boy is going to start having sexual feelings for women. Okay? He's going to start having sexual feelings for women. What is he supposed to do about that? Especially if he's homeschooled with me. What are you supposed to do about that? Right? So he's supposed to know how to engage with women, but then it starts to dawn on you, hey, you know what? A responsible father, a responsible mother, a responsible father would give their son an ability to provide for a woman, so that he could get a woman, he could have sex in a safe environment. We don't have that today. So I don't know why. Oh, so I was talking about the head lady, and basically, we train our women to be spinsters, and then when they're spinsters, we're like, ew, and when they're spinsters, we're like, well, why do they not make good marriages? Because a spinster doesn't make a good. It's not good wifey material. A spinster doesn't make a good wife. I'll tell you guys this way. A woman who depends upon you, or like anybody who depends upon you, it's going to be better for you as a man. Right? It's going to be better for you as a man. If she does not depend upon you, like, she doesn't really need you. You know, anybody who needs you is going to be better for you. Like, for instance, like I said, with regard to my son. Like, when my son gets old enough that he doesn't need me, he's probably just going to leave me. Obviously, and he should leave me. Duh. If he doesn't need me, he should leave me. Because he has a life that he should go explore the world with. He shouldn't wait on me hand and foot. Shouldn't be my secondary life. That's stupid. If he doesn't need me, he should leave me. Now, if he needs me, he should stay with me. He should listen to me. If he needs me, he should listen to me. If he needs me, he should respect me. But if he doesn't need me, he should just look and leave me. Duh. Now, if you're training women to be spinsters, right? They don't need you, so they shouldn't have to respect you. It's like right here now, like this podcast. You guys don't need me. You guys could just leave me. You guys could just open up the chat and be like, hey, Oni, you know what? Shut the fuck up. Fuck you. Matter of fact, that what happened yesterday. Some dude was in the chat just like, hey, fuck you guys. You guys are idiots. Why? He don't need me. That's why. Now, if I was, because here's the thing. It's like, I'll tell you guys the truth. It's not even that like I need I respect my father. So I don't, you shouldn't really disrespect your father. So it's not about whether you need your father or not, but you shouldn't really do that. But my point is this. My dad could say the dumbest shit, and I will not tell him that's stupid. Now, if one of you guys say the dumbest shit, absolutely I'll call you out. Like, if you guys say the same thing my dad said, I will call you guys out. Like, my dad one time told me, I was like, yeah, man, this brother was blah, 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 talking about a black person. And he's like, those are not my children. Why are you calling him your brother? And I'm like, no, Dad, I'm just, that's just what it means. He's like, no, you shouldn't call it. And I'm like, now if anybody else told me don't call it, I'd be like, yo, shut the fuck up, man. Yo, shut the fuck up. You know what I'm saying? But, it is what it is. Anyway, listen to the comments. Ellie Wananda says, there absolutely is a difference between the Swahilis. Ugandan Swahili is the worst because it's not really a lingua franca there. Yeah, I mean, exactly. It's like you have to have power and national thing. Brother Bakari says, Brother Bakari, you think, man, we can create our own language. See. Yeah, no, I agree though. We really should. Ellie Wananda says something was an excellent insight. See, like Ellie Wananda just said, brother, and it's like, yeah, that's what you're supposed to say. Well, my dad would have been like, don't call somebody brother. That's not my kid. Blah blah. And you're like, yo, shut the I didn't say that to him. I just said, okay, Dad. I just washed my mouth around him. But Brother Bakari said, we need you, Oni. We need your book writing expertise. We need you to keep teaching us how to trick. Yeah, you're right, man. If y'all don't know how to trick, man, that's a thing. No, really though, I think tricking is a little tangent, but tricking is not good. I mean, it's not that it's not good, but I do think that we have to evolve into a community that doesn't have premarital sex. You know what I mean? Like, sex really should be something that you do within your marriage. Sex should be something between married people. And I think because we don't get that, and most of us don't. You know what I mean? I didn't get it. Most of us don't get it, right? And and a lot of us feel like the married men, they can say it so easily because they're married. They're like, hey, why are you having sex with random women? I wouldn't do that. I'll just have sex with my wife. Yeah, duh, you have a wife. That's why you do it. Or if you don't have a wife, it's a little harder. But it's like, it's really true. It's really true because there's a few problems with having sex outside of your marriage. One, you can get this woman pregnant, right? And then a child comes in, and then you have to make the choice between, are you going to support this child or are you not? Now, if you don't support this child suffers. All because you couldn't keep your dick in your pants. And if you do support this child, that's fine, but guess what? When you do get a marriage, right? Then you still have to support somebody else that you don't even mess with anymore. Right? Or, the mother. Or you have to, give away to, because essentially, here's another thing about marriage, right? One of the things you got to remember is that one thing you want is your son. You want your son to leave an inheritance. And you want a wife to teach your son. Now, if you just run around messing with some woman, here's the thing. Do you leave this other kid an inheritance? And you might say, well, absolutely. Okay, but did you teach him how to manage his inheritance? Are you really intimately involved in this other kid's life? Right? And you might say, well, now, again, you could be, right? Because, some of us are professional dads. Hashtag Brother Bakari, hashtag Oni, right? But but outside of that, what I'm saying is this. You might, like one thing I want with this woman of mine is that, for instance, I'm writing this book. She could teach some of the wisdom in the book to the children. Right? So, but now hear this. If I had a child with a woman that I wasn't married to, right? Or even a woman that I don't have contact with. Or even just a woman that I just send her money every whatever, right? Is she going to be teaching my ideas to our children? Is she that kind of woman? Why did you sleep with this woman and you don't know where her head's at? And you don't know that you can cooperate with her to teach your child how to handle his inheritance that you're going to give him when he becomes of age. You know what I mean? So it's really complicated. It's like, don't. And again, you could just wear a condom, obviously. You could keep it slow, whatever. But the reality is that as long as we don't think that, as long as sex is not the reward for marriage, in a sense, right? As long as sex is nothing except for something to do to exchange money with somebody, right? You're gonna screw yourself over. And in fact, we're actually talking about Kenya and Uganda, whatever. But let me actually switch over the screen because I was linking this conversation on the Discord. I was linking this conversation earlier, and so let me show you guys this. In fact, because this is actually, in fact, I think I put it on Twitter, low key. Which book is it? Probably this book. So it's like this. You see, it says the process of the emergence and recruitment of wage earners has significant impact on the sexual construction of women in colonial Kenya. The emergence of Kikuyu women as wage earners in British agricultural plantations and the failure of male wage earners have greatly facilitated the emergence of commercial sex workers in Kenya. Okay? So the idea is this, that essentially this whole wage earning system, especially, having women need to work for themselves, having women, what's it called, spinsters, and basically creating this quote unquote tricking, like tricks or whatever, silly rabbit tricks are for kids. All right, pause. But anyway, that whole thing does come about because of the economy, because of the way economics works. And so you kind of see, even though, Brother Bakari was kind of joking about learning how to trick, this was something that came to us in Africa. And so when I went to Africa, because the thing is that I wasn't really, into tricks, into tricking before I went to Africa, but it's a serious problem in Africa. One of the original reasons why I wanted to leave Africa, when I went to Tanzania, I wanted to leave within the first 2 weeks, 3 weeks. Because I was like, oh no, they the women want you to trick down here, because the men would tell you, hey man, you got to start tricking, if you want some pussy, man, you got to give her some, you got to give her some money, blah. The men were telling me this stuff, and I'm from Brooklyn, right? You got to say Brooklyn like a Brooklynite, and I was like, ew, no, I'm not gonna do that shit. But it turns out this was a super stupidly common thing. right? And I actually wanted to leave the country at that point because I was like, ew. But of course, eventually you stay and you have your when in Rome. But but anyway. So he says, closely related to the process of the emergence of the wage earners is a young man's access to cash, which they could purchase cattle as payment for bride wealth, right? With the increase of bride wealth, the price and demand for cattle also rose. So again, you basically have the economy messing up because they introduced cash into the system, right? Fathers increasingly felt their daughters would bring more livestock into the family, so the daughters were married off to suitors who could provide more cattle. Okay? For a young man, the only way to acquire bride wealth was through wage labor that the British introduced. So again, once upon a time it was like, hey, look, your father would give you a bunch of cows, right? And then it turns out, hey, you know what? The British have all the cows, or some shit like that. You know what I mean? Or nah, I'm not gonna give you a cow. That cow costs 1,000 shillings. You know what I mean? Or $1,000, right? So blah blah blah. So basically, the British messed it up. So he said this process, however, often lengthy and cumbersome. And so, according to White, this helped bring about entrepreneurial prostitutes who used their earnings for the repeated sale of sexual relationships to acquire livestock. Okay? This connection between the colonial construction of sexuality and prostitution is further elucidated in Nairobi during the last century. So they say, basically the prostitutes were there. He says, when we went to pick beans, we sometimes found those Kiburu men, so it was extra money. We went to pick beans and had a man in secret. Sometimes a woman would go there for the men. She would take a gunia gunny sack so that no one would be suspicious. It looked like she was going to pick beans, but she would use the gunia as a blanket. When they saw a woman lying on her gunia, they would take out their money and she would motion for him to lie down with her. They paid us, and sometimes they gave us babies, so we were rich. We had money and babies that way, right? So you see, this is like premarital sex, okay? And you see what it did in Kenya in the last century. And of course, like I said, it kind of continues. And I read that article already on this podcast, but I think it's worth remembering. I wonder if I remember the name of the article, but like essentially there was an article. It was like a scientific article, and basically what it spoke about was, like prostitution is very, very popular in East Africa at this point in time. So it's like, before I went to East Africa, I never would have paid for anything. But that's highly, highly, like, it's just not a thing. You just, it'd be very hard to have sexual relations and not pay. You know what I mean? If you're in East Africa at this point. It's particularly Tanzania, I guess. It would just be very, very hard because it's ingrained in the culture. Like again, to the point where, that's the only way. Like I'm not saying that everybody does it, but it's like 95%. You know what I mean? It's like 95% at this point, which is pretty scary. I'm trying to look for that article, but I can't find it. But I did a podcast on it before, so if you guys don't know what I'm talking about. But for some reason, my download folder has like a whole bunch of... What the fuck is downloaded to my computer? Anyway, I'm like seeing like a whole bunch of... almost looks like some spy shit, low-key. Anyway, but a little disconcerting, but it is what it is. I wish I could find that article though. I can't find it. All right, but anyway, but yeah, the point is that so like tricking is not good, but it's like, sometimes like you see, it became a culture, or essentially it's a part of the wage system. So the wage system, or the fact that women are being prepared to be spinsters, really means, okay, in fact, that's what I was gonna say. I was supposed to write a chapter on this, or a paragraph on this, but essentially it's like this: sex is supposed to be something you do in marriage, okay, not something you do outside of marriage. However, there's the concept of wholesale versus retail, okay. So wholesale is when you buy in bulk. Okay? But it's unaffordable. So like basically, it's not unaffordable, but it's like you can get, let's say, 50 cases of water, right? Or no, 50 bottles of water for like, let's say $40. Okay? So it averages to 80 cents a bottle, right? Or you can get, but it costs you $40. All right, so you got to go to the store and spend $40 for 50 bottles of water, or you could buy one water for $1, right? And so it's more expensive per bottle, right? Because it's $1 per bottle, but it's cheaper because it's $1 versus $40. Okay, so with marriage, you're basically buying the sex, right? But you're buying it wholesale. Okay, so you're buying a lifetime guarantee of sex, right? For like for a house, I guess, right? For a house and feeding people and clothing people and all that kind of stuff, right? And of course, she does other things besides sex. She helps you in the house and all that kind of stuff. But you're basically buying the lifetime supply, right? And it could cost you a pretty penny because it's a fucking house. Or you buy the retail, right? Which is, I'll buy you some. In America, the tricking looks like I'll buy you some food. You know what I mean? Or I'll pay for your cab fare to come over here, right? And in Tanzania, it's a little more direct, where you're like, here's some money, have a nice day. But like, it's really the problem of how essentially, because like women couldn't wait around the house for a husband anymore. You have this kind of stuff. You know what I mean? Like, because of like, I'll put it this way too. Because another thing I'm thinking about is this. Oh yeah, sorry, I think it's probably right here, right? Forced labor. But basically, it's like the wage earners, often failed to return home, and this led to an abandonment of tribal and village ties. So this is really important. So what happens is this: let's say you're in a village of, let's say 100 people, right? Or let's say 100 people your age, okay? And you're a woman, all right? You're a woman. So there are 50 women in the village, 50 girls in the village, and 50 boys in the village. And that's pretty good for you, okay? Your father knows, hey, look, you're going to get married to some boy at some point, right? Now, what happens when 30 of the boys leave the village and go work in the city? Right? And they never come back. Right? So they make him male wage laborer, leave home to work for alien and often absentee thing. So what happens is that now there are only 20 men for you to marry that's still in the village. Right? And worse is this. The wage earners are making way more than the people in the village. Right? So essentially the girls then have to either marry these 20 remaining guys, but then 30 of them aren't. Now, the guys can marry more than one woman, but maybe not. And then it becomes, well, look, I'm a young girl, and I really have nothing, Like, I have nothing to give to my family, I have nothing to so on and so forth, So this kind of devastation, low-key, does create the commercial sex worker. And so when we talk about tricking, we're really talking about how the economy is shaped in such a way that women don't have a lot of marriageable options, and so they resort to essentially, instead of waiting for wholesale, giving out retail prices. You know what I mean? So anyway. What the fuck? All right, yeah, man. Take it easy, Ellie. It's late where Ellie is at, and plus I'm just talking about tricking. He's like, hey, he's a married guy. He's gotta go to his wife and make sure He can't justify. He's like, she's gonna be like, why you listen to this dude about tricking? All right. Anyway, so that's a little transit. So we're going back to the article, and this article we actually got too many whatever we call it. So he says, also presumably part of the southern dialects of Swahili would be the Swahili spoken in Swahili communities along the southern Tanzania coast up to, but not including the parts of northern Mozambique where Mwani is spoken, namely those in Kilwa and on Mafia Island. These forms of Swahili speech are not addressed here because of the paucity of data, for example, for Mafia, or because either a form of Kionguja or Standard Swahili has replaced the original dialect, Kilwa. So he's like, you can't really find the Kilwa anymore. It should be emphasized that while the Swahili dialects does not consist of an unbroken, geographically uninterrupted chain, although parts are, the various communities have maintained connections mainly through trade and social intercourse via the sea lanes. Further, because of how they are strung out over such a long area, various subparts of the chain have been different contact experiences, some of which can be seen in the kind of non-Arabic loanwords present in the different subparts. Mwe, spoken in southern coastal Somalia centered on the town of Brava, can either be considered as part of the Swahili subgroup, thus a Swahili dialect, or as a distinct language depending on one's interpretation of the lexico-statistical results. It is, however, not mutually intelligible with other Swahili dialects, and in that paper we treat it as a separate language, albeit one that is very closely related to Swahili, and that other than the lexico-statistical criteria, it could be argued places it within Swahili. Mwini, spoken as it is in southern Somalia, is situated just north of the Swahili dialect of the Lamu area and shares with those dialects high percentages of basic lexis and other linguistic material. How Swahili is Sabaki? Beginning with European scholars, scrutiny of Swahili and other languages of the East African coast, disproportionate attention has always been paid to the lexical content of Swahili. Let's look at the facts. Lexico-statistical studies place Swahili squarely with Sabaki. There are no other languages or groups of Bantu languages in East Africa to which Swahili is related in this way. While Sabaki, Swahili has the same LS status as most of the other dialectically complex major subgroups, namely Pokomo and Mijikenda. Swahili overall has retained about the same percentage of basic Bantu vocabulary in a 100-word list as Mijikenda and Pokomo, but somewhat less than has Comorian. So basically there's like a basic Bantu language of 100 words, and Swahili has about 75%, which is close to Mijikenda and Comorian. What I want to say is that I think we might have to focus a little bit more on the reading, because apparently I didn't read too much of the pages, so I'm going to try that. Let me see. All right, so Eli Wananda says they all just came back home. So yeah, but nah, trick and talk. Yeah, I feel you, brother. Take it easy, man. So 3, as a language, the Swahili dialect continues. Yeah, I'm about to be cussing and all that. You can't have the kids listening. So as a language, the Swahili dialect continues with a cohesive lexically as a Pokomo dialect, right? Chain, or as the Mijikenda cluster of dialects, but not as cohesive as Comorian. See Figure 1. So this is footnote 5 and 6. So this was where footnote 6 was. Footnote 5 was here, where he's talking about social intercourse by the sea lane. So he says, for greater detailed explication of each of the dialects of the Swahili continuum, see my paper. While this paper and the research on which it based focus on the dialects named here, there are other named dialects which do not discuss, mostly because of the lack of data. And then number 6 was about the averages of the thing. An internal average is the average of the percentage of a common language, say of a list, 100-item basic list, shared among every member of the group with other members of the group, apart from what percentages of commonly shared vocabulary members of the group might share with languages outside the group. Thus, for example, the Comorian 81% is the average of each Comorian dialect comparison of commonly shared vocabulary with other Comorian dialects. And this is, so he's like, okay, so Swahili is related to other Swahili languages, I guess. So as by cohesive is simply meant that a group in general among its various member languages is lexically uniform. We can say that the higher the internal average, the more uniform the language group or dialect cluster is, and conversely, lower figures indicate greater lexical diversity among the members of the group. Thus, lexically speaking, the Comorian dialects are more internally similar than any of the other Sabaki groups, including Swahili, right? And so he's like, even in Swahili, and this is what I'm saying, even in Swahili, or even in English, you will find there's not perfect cohesion in the language, or in the lexical cohesion, because you're going to find slang. Slang happens normally, and then it becomes a part of the language. So again, the black people in Missouri or Mississippi or what have you, they're going to sound different from the black people of Louisiana and Texas, and definitely sound different from the black people of Brooklyn and what have you. Now, when you have the invention of the radio, right, which is what I was talking about, the television, right, when you have the invention of the radio, languages can become more uniform, but again, a lot of these people are not using radios, you know, so it's not going to be perfectly internally cohesive. He says, number 4, parts of Swahili are more cohesive than others. So he's like, look at this group. So he says, let's go on 7. He says, it should be emphasized here that while the ND set stands out, let's say statistically, the SD set does not. Let's say statistically, Swahili consists of a core cluster and ND dialects, with the other chained incrementally to the core of the typical continuum. Thus, it is only ND that is positively subgrouped, while SD is not. Although part of SD do subgroup, Pemba, Tambukuta, so on and so forth. However, the distinction of ND and SD depend only partially on LS. There are other confirming linguistic criteria. So north and south. So south is basically Tanzania. North is thing. So he says, he says that basically the I'm actually surprised, but basically he's saying that Swahili in the Kenyan region is actually more cohesive than the Swahili in the Tanzanian region, which is actually surprising because you would think that the Swahili, the Tanzanian would be more cohesive, but again, they have a lot more. They probably have a lot more dialects too. So he says, instead of cohesiveness, we could also look at the figures as measures of conservatism. That is, some parts of the Swahili continuum have undergone less erosion of their core Bantu vocabulary and have retained more core vocabulary. Oh, okay, so the Tanzanians might be borrowing more. There are 2 points to be made here. Swahili is not a monolith, it is dialectically diverse, and its part have different histories, a fact that has to be taken into account in any discussion of origin. Parts of Swahili are comparable to subparts of Sabaki, which also retain high percentages of core Bantu languages. For example, the Northern Swahili figure of 82% is comparable to the Comorian figure of 81%. So lexical content of Swahili and Sabaki languages. Apart from the above, there's insight to be gained by looking at the nature of the basic core vocabularies of Swahili and of the Sabaki languages and its content. Swahili lexis is characteristically Sabaki in respect to the lexical origins. One test of this can be seen in the 100 basic word list that was used to calculate the lexicostatistical similarity indices. Basic word lists tend to be stable and less vulnerable to borrowing or replacement than other sorts of semantic-based sets of vocabulary. Thus, if Swahili is inherently a Sabaki language, then it should show characteristics similar to other members of the group. This is what we find. So basically, he shows the list. Swahili is at 72, and so on and so forth. But basically, again, you're gonna borrow your loan words are gonna be foreign words. You know what I mean? You're like foreign fruits and shit. It's not gonna be like foreign ideas. Like restaurant is a foreign idea in like traditional Africa. You know, why would you have some place where somebody's cooking? Get yourself a wife. You know, like a lot of our communities used to just be get yourself a damn wife. But nowadays it's like, again, like wholesale versus retail. Instead of buying a wife, not buying a wife, but instead of getting a wife. Oh yeah. In fact, instead of getting a wife and having her cook for you, right? You you instead go to another woman and say, I can't afford to buy a wife. Can you make me a meal? And that's the whole restaurant. Everything becomes retailized, and that's really where it comes down to. So CB is common Bantu, and PSA is Proto-Sabaki. So, yeah, other include items with origins. Sources of Lexis and Swahili dialect. So here's another video. It's a northern dialect and blah, 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 southern dialect. So this figure shows that Swahili is lexically similar and comparable to other languages of its matrix. In Swahili, okay, so yeah. In Swahili, Swahili retains Bantu lexis in percentages that parallel other Sabaki languages. 72% of retained lexis matches closely the 74% average for the rest of Sabaki. Swahili's attestation of innovative Proto-Sabaki lexis is similar to other Sabaki languages. Loan material in Swahili from all sources, including Arabic, is not appreciably nor significantly different than the amount of loan material we find in other Sabaki dialects. 14.5% figure of total loans in its line, with a 15% average for Sabakis. Within Swahili, SD dialects of Zanzibar, Pemba, and adjacent Rimba coasts show greater lexical intrusion from loaning languages, whereas Ndi, or the Lamu archipelago, shows 50% less intrusion. So, again, the people in Zanzibar, where, Zanzibar has a lot of foreigners, right? They will have more, like, Zanzibar was straight up colonized by the Arabs, right? And it was an awful, awful colonization where they were like, molesting children type shit, right? And then the Zanzibar Revolution happened, and they like kicked the Zanzibars, they kicked the Arabs out. But like, yeah, they were more closely, Arabic, as opposed to, as the person points out, northern Kenya, where yes, the British came in, but the British mostly colonized the Kikuyu, okay, and Kikuyu speak Kikuyu. So the Swahili speakers in Kenya might have been less impacted by colonization than the Swahili speakers in Zanzibar, who were like literally colonized by the Arabs. So anyway, and of course, everybody goes to Tanzania for the Swahili. But like, it sounds kind of like Kenya might be the one of the sources to look back on. So number 5, it says, in the loan category, an interesting contrast exists when we compare coastal Sabaki languages. Okay, so I'm a little confused. So Bit of Medicine says, even radio is regional. The South is listening to the South. Are they Southern accents on thing? So it looks like there was a comment by Eli Wananda, but I can't see it. So I don't know. Let me just double check. So he says, "Oh, Revolutionary Matron deleted Eli Wananda's comments or something." I don't know. So anyway, so Bittermaster says, even radio is regional. The South is listening to the South. But like, shout out to Revolutionary Matron. She might have accidentally pressed the button or something. What it is. Sorry about that. My face hit my phone. Okay. I'll speak a little louder, I guess, right? She's like, damn, my face. Why does motherfucker? Why he so quiet? But shout out to Revolutionary Matron. She's here. I feel like the Midwest accent is still used in the South. I remember I saw a joke. It was like a joke thing, but it was like one of those SNL skits, and they were like, "What if the news was told by Southerners?" type shit, and like, you couldn't understand it. It was just so funny. I mean, it wasn't funny, but like, the audience was laughing. So that's it wasn't funny, but it was SNL. You know what I'm saying? like somebody was laughing. But was it funny? No. All right. Anyway, let's keep going. So, in the loan category, an interesting contrast exists when we compare coastal Sabaki languages versus hinterland Sabaki languages. Coastal Sabaki languages have about 5% foreign loans, mostly Arabic in origin, while the hinterland group has none in the 100-word list. The hinterland group also stands out in having large percentages of local loans, either from other Sabaki languages or from areas other Bantu languages. So he's like, look, the groups that weren't coastal, that didn't engage with the Arabs, if they had loan words, they were from other African languages. And that's what you want to see. You know, which is, again, if you're trying to Africanize the language. But that's another thing to remember, too. People will automatically borrow languages from other people. Like, people will automatically have relationships with other people. And that's just the reality of it. You know, in fact, I'll tell you guys, matter of fact, this is what happened. So there was like a Chinese section in Tanzania, like a Chinese area. And I don't know, I just felt like buying some, I know, Kunin. I bought a lot of African food. Come on. But I was like, let me see if let me see what the Chinese restaurant's like, right? I go to the Chinese restaurant, and these motherfuckers don't know what General Tso's chicken is. They did not know what General Tso's chicken is. They didn't know what sesame chicken was. I had to pull up a picture, and they were like, what the fuck is that? You know? And they were Chinese people, right? They're just like, what is that? Now, for those of you who don't know, General Tso's chicken is like an American dish, right? That Chinese people make. But like, yeah, they don't do it over there, right? And, you know, eventually they did bring me something kind of like, no, they brought me like bone, you know, like basically like barbecue chicken, low key. But they didn't know what the fuck I was looking at. But the point is that when you interact with other people, like, you're gonna create a new language. You're gonna, like, cause like General Tso's chicken is like an American word at this point. Like, it's a part of English at this point, right? It's not a real thing. Like, it's not real outside. Like, it's literally, I think it's really literally made in New York, and you know, all of us in America know what it is, right? But people in China probably wouldn't, and then people in Tanzania, even if they were Chinese, definitely don't. But it is what it is. So he says Swahili's pattern here is closer to the hinterland group than to either Comorian or Mwini, which are located on the periphery of the Sabaki zone and thus less likely to be influenced by local learning, whereas they presumably were subject to the same forces that led to the borrowing of Arabic loans. So he's like, Comorian and Mwini, like other African languages, were exposed to the Arabs, so they took up the language. It's like, that's what it is. Like that's the real world. You know, we could pretend and be like, no, you should only borrow from Africa. You really borrow from whoever you interact with. You know, you really borrow from whoever you interact with. And worse, like I said, you form relationships, you form marriages on whomever you interact with. This is why it's important to be surrounded by black people. Basic vocabulary has only moderately been affected by foreign influences, as seen in the study of the 100-word list. In a similar test applied by Nurse to a larger 1,000-item list of relatively culturally neutral vocabulary for a selection of Swahili dialect, there are somewhat complementary results. The majority of lexical items in the four dialects, ranging from 66 to 69%, is inherited lexes, but there are a larger number of loans from 17 to 22%, but there is also much larger set of items of unknown provenance. Among this latter set could, of course, be loans, and this would increase the percentage of loans, both local and foreign. Important here, however, is that the fact that the foreign loans, Arabic, are still a smaller figure relative to the total set, usually about 50% of the total number of loans. So he's like, Arabic loans are actually only 50% of the loan words. So as to say that it's mostly, like, the language is mostly, let's say 66%, he didn't give the percentage yet, 66%, you know, Bantu, if you will, or 66% African. And then of the loans, which might be 20% of the words, like 10% of the words might be Arabic, right? So he says, moreover, these percentages are in line with what we know of the Sabaki languages and other East African Bantu languages. Swahili is not unique in borrowing, and we do not have to go far afield to document the fact. For example, English, it's only the particulars that are different, dependent, as they are on a different cultural historical mix of variables. For example, Swahili communities and communities of Comorian, Mwani, and Mwini speakers have for a long time been in contact with non-East Africans, whereas in contrast, other Sabaki groups have had contact both with speakers of hinterland languages as well as have Swahili speakers. For example, Iwana have large loan sets from Cushitic languages, and Ujikenda from Central Kenyan Bantu languages. So he's like, Iwana people have like borrowed from Cushitic languages, and Ujikenda borrowed from Kenyan Bantu languages, whereas Swahili probably borrowed from Arabs. So he says, this certainly cannot be because ND has come under less extensive external Arabic pressure than the others. The influence of Islam, for example, is as strong, if not stronger, and the northern islands have long been recognized by scholars as the heartland of Swahili classical literary tradition. Both have been long-term operators in creating opportunities for, especially Arabic loan intrusions. Lexical frequency is clear on that matter. So, another thing is this too. Remember, Swahili used to be written in the Arabic language. So these are. Oh, he's not going to show us the list. Sources of lexis in 1,000 word list. He shows that for Swahili. So this is different. This is the north. This is like the Kenyan Swahili. This is the Tanzanian Swahili, and then this is the English language. So he says. So essentially, they're saying English is actually 83% inherited, but 15% loans, whereas basically Southern Swahili is like 20% loans and like 66% inherited, but it also loans from Africa, you know, and then there's like another unknown part. Now again, I don't know if English is really 83% inherited, but it is what it is. So he says, question marks indicate some doubt about the identification of some items in the list. Arabic loans in sorry, let me see what the comments are. If there's any comments. My phone is slow for some reason. So Arabic loans in Swahili. Let me just switch screen for a second. What the? I switched to the wrong screen. So no, it's just Revolution Matron telling us she made a mistake, which is okay. We all make mistakes. It's no biggie. Let's see. Let's go back to the chat. So you say Arabic loans in Swahili. At least two sets of Arabic loans can be distinguished in Swahili. One set, by far the majority, is relatively recent in origin, having entered the language during the period of Omani suzerainty, which started in the 17th century. The other set is an older body of loan material, also from Arabic, some ultimately from Persian. We are able to make the distinction because the recent Omani set has a high degree of semantic and phonological identity between the Omani source and synchronic form of the loan in Swahili, making adjustments for adaptive phonological processes. Furthermore, this set does not exhibit earlier phonological processes that are tested in Sabaki. The older pre-Omani set of vocabulary does, on the other hand, exhibit regular Sabaki shifts with a wider distribution of reflex items throughout Sabaki, and thus looks either like Proto-Sabaki or Proto-Swahili items. 10. Some examples are kant cut, are kant for cut, which is the Arabic Indian, iwavu fishing net, mpula steel, which is Persian, mtungu for water pot, ngamila for camel, right? Others are likely to have emerged, entered Proto-Swahili even earlier. Some examples are lubani for incense, musikiti for mosque, right? Kanzu, men's garment, etc. So, it's comparable to the irregularity seen in non-borrowed inherited lexis and can be attributed to later interdialectical borrowing. So, again, a lot of these words that we're talking about, like umpula, is a particular type of steel. You know? Kant, again, this probably seems like a basic word for us, but again, they might have a different word for, like, it might, I don't know. But again, it's like, this kind of tells you, look, there was fishing, there were camels. Now, again, you're not going to have an indigenous word for camels, right? Because why would you have an indigenous word for camels? You know what I mean? Now, you can create a word like, animal with a humped back or something like that, and then just make words up. But the thing I noticed with Swahili is that it's formulaic in the nouns, but not really in the animals, as far as I can tell. And then they have lubani, right? Again, incense is something that's popular among the Arabs, not really. Mosque, and this is the kanzu, which is probably an outfit, like a hijab or something, but for men, right? Like, those are not words that you would have, those are not things that you'd have words for already. And this would be like a particular style, like, like a mosque is a particular style of a religious building. It's not a actual thing. But you also see this too. Look at this. muzikiti, right, and mosque, you see that even the English word for mosque is mosque, right? So the English word for mosque is also borrowed, and the English word for kanzu is also borrowed, right? If you see an Arab, men's Arab outfit, we probably also call it kanzu. I mean, I don't know. I honestly don't know what they're talking about, but that's probably what it is, right? Now, whereas water pot, you might say, well, why don't you have a word for water pot? But again, this is a particular economic system that might not necessarily have been a part of thing. Like for instance, fishing with a net might not have been a thing at this point in time for them. Like they might have been fishing with a line or something, and of course, steel is a very particular development in metal. I'm not saying that they didn't have it, but like, I'll put it this way: Zimbabwe produced really good steel too. So if they were trading with Zimbabwe, they might have they probably would have borrowed Zimbabwe's word, but instead they were trading with Persia, I guess, and they had to borrow Persia's word, right? But that's how language works, though. I'm just really trying to emphasize and stress that. Because otherwise. So the Sabaki character of Swahili. When we look at other aspects of the grammar of Swahili, it is apparent that much of what we think of as being Swahili is not unique to the language. So when we look at other aspects of the grammar of Swahili, it is apparent that much of what we think of as being Swahili is not unique to the language. Many of its features are Sabaki features and share with neighboring Sabaki languages. Many of these features are inherited from even earlier intermediate periods, from NEC or even earlier stages. Typically, others are due to historical events involving social interactions among various Sabaki-speaking groups. So the phonology. Some of the features of the area of phonology are 1. The reduction of 7 Bantu vowels to 5. The shift from Bantu 7 vowel systems to a 5 vowel one in Swahili is part of a general areal phenomenon in the region and is widely attested in NEC and beyond in the adjacent groups to the south. There is no evidence that the reduction is due to non-East African external influence. So he's like, it's very popular in the different Sabaki languages to only have 5 vowels instead of 7. And coincidentally, English also has 5 vowels. So, although I don't think English actually has 5 vowels. So Swahili literally has 5 vowels, right? So, but English doesn't, in the sense that I shouldn't say we, but you guys know what I'm saying. The way the English use their vowels, it really varies. So like O can sometimes be like a long O versus a short O. You know what I mean? And the difference between a short O and a long O is like I just used it actually. It's like the sound O and no, and the sound aw and long, right? Those are 2 different ways to use that vowel. In Swahili, they don't do that. So they wouldn't even say vowel. It would be vowels. Yeah. So this word pronounced in Swahili would be vowels, but they don't have this word obviously. But so this would be grow ups. Anyway, so this would be grow ups in English, in Swahili, because they really do not. So because this is group in English, which is like the U sound. No, actually no. This would be grow oops in Swahili. Yeah. All right. So the shift from Bantu 7 vowel system to sorry about that. So reduction of tonal distinctiveness. So Swahili has lost tone. Philipson argues that Swahili simply represents an endpoint of an areal development that other Sabaki languages are continuing today. So he's like, look, a lot of them don't have tones and so forth. And I think that's what I was talking about with the vowel thing. Aspirated voiceless stops. Swahili contrasts a series of voiceless stops with voiceless aspirated stops. Ptah. The aspirated series derives from a sequence of nasal plus voiceless, maybe he misspelled it this time, stop, as they do in Mwini, Mijikenda, and Pokomo, and parts of NEC, right? The loss of L, I don't know, in certain environments in Swahili is well documented. Ikala, ka, became ka, live, sit, staying. The initial stage of L loss before U is attested not only by Swahili, but by Lord Pokomo and Comorian, whereas the other Sabaki languages preserve L before U, Uma versus Luma, which is bite. So, okay. So basically, they sometimes remove the L. Now, because I don't see it here, but I know Ka'a means to live, right? So, Unaka'a Wapi, right? It's like, where do you live, right? Or where are you living right now, right? Where are you staying right now? Unaka'a Wapi. But essentially, he's saying that Ikala used to be it. So, it used to be Una Ikala Wapi. But they just shortened it to Unaka'a. So there are further phonological changes that only parts of the Swahili continuum share with other Sabaki languages. Some examples of these are PSA, F, and V. In the Swahili dialect of the Lamu area, PSA, F, and V before the PSA, high vowel I shift. This is the change that the northern Swahili dialects share with Comorian, respectively, while in the southern dialects we find F and V preserved. Few examples suffice. Fika, which is arrive, Fika, Silifika, Siha, sit down, to V, Via, Zia, Zila. So strengthening. In the southern Swahili dialects, voiced stops are attested, where the other Swahili dialects attest non-stops in the same environment following a reconstructed front HV, I, thus, steel, Iwa, prow. The attestation of B and D is due to the effect of the proceeding from HV. This is just technicality. I don't know. A general form of the shift is attested in Comorian. It applies all PSA consonants preceded by the front HV. Hebo. So the reason why I'm reading this article, although I really wouldn't read these kind of articles, so I'm glad that you guys stick with me for the time you stick with me. But the reason why I'm reading it is because this could be beneficial in my book, where we're talking about Swahili as a language. And like as you can see, it's so boring that I really wouldn't read it personally. Well, I mean, I read it for a podcast, but I wouldn't read it personally. Anyway, so the Mijikenda languages Pokomo and Comorian attest a change in which P and T are usually attested, respectively, in intervocalic position. The Comorian K is also weakened, becoming PSA. Yeah, you know, I can't even read this stuff. Babika. The Swahili dialects which share features of Lediton are Makunduchi, in which only P is lenited, and Vomba and Chifundi, in which both P and T have lenited fleflexes, for example, Rabika, so on and so forth. And Mri to Muri for tree. And again, tree is actually MT, so it's kind of interesting. PSA C in parts of Sabaki cluster, blah, 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 blah. Similarly, the northern dialect, only the Winnie share the shift of non-affiliate. Yeah, this is all, like, it's really, really technical. We have the patality of the proto-continent. So some of these things are not really supposed to be read by lay people. You know? Ijiko is I. And here's the thing. They spell it, so they don't use a C, they use a K over here. But I can't really understand the rest. PSA and J, there's a parallel. And this is what I'm saying. This is part of literacy. So I want to show you guys, like, a lot of these things, like here. Well, I guess these are real. Like here. Like, you can't read this. Right? And this is how it is to be illiterate. This is how it feels to be illiterate, where it's like people put up things. And I mean, you know what it's like. You could, like, pick up, like, Mandarin, some Chinese book, and just look at it and be like, I don't know what does this mean? But, like, that's pretty much how people always feel. Some people always feel. So there's a parallel change affecting the same language in which PSA and Z, Fundoka, blah, 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 blah. Ujala, hunger. Yeah, maybe. Yeah, I think so. You know, Nja means I am hungry. So they're like, these are the Swahili. This one's Unja. So I think Ong is the one I'm learning. I'm pretty sure. Maybe. No. Doesn't look it. Alright, so behavior of PSA G. The Northern Swahili dialect. Oh, wait. Was it the C? Yeah, so the C got replaced. See, the C became a K, honestly. Unja is still there. Behavior of G. The Northern Swahili dialects, and this is all just the same. C, in Wani, C becomes S. This is a result of an areal change of all languages in the region of test. We assume the earlier stage of Wani attested C. Okay. Northern Swahili dialect shows the loss of G in stem initial and intervocalic environments in a large number of cases. A change its share with Comorian. Elwana, Mwini, and Wani are regular in losing G. Thus, it is not completely regular. Shift in the Northern Swahili dialects. Southern dialects, as a rule, preserve the voice stop reflex of G. Examples, chagula, which is choose, so on and so forth. So there are two areas for the morphology which will reinforce the theme of this section, that of tense and aspects and the noun class system. Tense, so he misspelled tense right here. Tense aspect, this is considerable diversity in the tense aspect system of Swahili from dialect to dialect. There's also true of Sabaki and NEC. Moreover, if we only speak of standard Swahili, we miss the richness and variety of the system. Our goal here will be to show how some aspects of the system, our treatment is not comprehensive, either derived from an older geographically extensive system or are similar, if not identical to the system in the Sabaki or NEC languages. Swahili exhibits the following characteristics. We look at some examples of both Swahili features as a Sabaki or NEC feature. So I don't know why these brothers actually read this thing, because this is actually like, what the fuck am I reading? Real Black Gentleman was like, yeah, I enjoyed that reading. I'm like, oh, it's gonna be an enjoyable reading. This thing is just technical as a mofo. All right, so future Swahili dialects express the future using a reflex of kaka, want. So in Swahili, want sometimes it could be taka, right? So ni ta songa membe. Oh yeah, so then it's also ta, right? Ta was like the future tense. So want is taka, like unataka chakula, means do you want food? And then ni ta is future tense. So ni ta sanga, I will forge ahead. Ni taka vio songa mbele, as I will forge ahead. Rucha cheka, we will laugh, right? So now, rucha cheka, which is interesting that they say is that inside of let's say Tanzanian Swahili, it'll be tuta cheka, right? Tu for we, ta for in the future, cheka for laugh, right? And then so they're saying in this dialect of Swahili, it's rucha cheka, and then you kind of see, oh yeah, these languages are definitely related, Rito seka, we will laugh, and that's the NC. So they don't. So these people use R instead of T, right? And cha instead of T, and these people use re instead of tu, and TSO instead of thing. And that's the thing that happens naturally in language. Like if you start spelling how people are speaking, they're saying riso seka, right? These people are saying rucha cheka. And the normal Swahili, or the Swahili in Tanzania, is tuta cheka. But again, it's really a matter of which of these is the powerhouse. So the people who are saying it's tuta cheka is the Tanzanian government. You get what I'm saying? But the people on the coast, or the people on the periphery, the people who are not in Dar es Salaam, are going to be saying, Rucha Cheka, and eventually, tu chacheka, and eventually it becomes Rucha Cheka. And it just reminds me of, there was this game they made us play in elementary school called the telephone game. And the idea was that they had us all sit down as students in like a circle, and the teacher would tell the last student something, and the first student something, and then we go around the circle, and then the last student will say what they think the first student heard, right? And I don't know how the game messes up, but the game always messes up, and of course, part of it is maybe, there's a bunch of children, but that's another part of it too. The people speaking this language could be inspired by the children. Or again, they could just be saying it casually, saying it quickly. And again, yeah, you could pick up the language as a kid, and you could think they're saying rucha cheka when they're saying tuta cheka, right? And it just becomes a dialect eventually. And of course, you might introduce new words, and anybody could do anything really. Because like I said, the whole cap or gyat, you know, because gyat was a word already. You know, like everybody heard of gyat dang, you know, which is like, you know, instead of saying god dang, you know, you're like, you know, gyat, you know, you give it a whatever. But then the guys are now, you know, oh, gyat is a butt, is a woman's butt entirely. Like they might have misunderstood what it meant, or they're just being comical. But for whatever reason, it becomes a part of the language, right? And that's it. So this is found in the northern Swahili dialects. Amu twapenda, right? We love, right? Yeah, twapenda. Yeah, twapenda. So again, in basic Swahili, or Swahili that we know, Tanzanian Swahili, it's gonna be tutapenda, right? Tutapenda. No, tunapenda. Tunapenda. We love, right? But here they say twa apenda, right? So we love. So vita yauja yuaja. So this is another one that it would be different. So he comes, she come. It's najua, you know. Or so in if you were saying not najua, it'd be ajua, yeah. So it'd be ajua for he is coming or something like that. So it is widespread throughout NEC. Mwayomba, you ask for, will ask for. And again, this is another one. If you're saying you ask for, and it would be naumba. No, naumba is I'm asking for. It would be unaumba, right? Or for like if you're asking you plural, it would be umwamba. I think it's umwamba, right? Which is pretty interesting because that is kind of this. It's say without the y. You see what I'm saying? But then it becomes, well, why is the y not there, right? Because if you're saying naumba, right? Naumba, like Naomba, naumba, right? And they're saying basically nayomba, right? Just the sound between the a and the o, but you know, they pronounce it better, and then more. And then if you were to write it down, what you're hearing is Mwaumba. Mwayomba. You will buy, are buying Shambhala Mandika, which is again, this is kind of Basic Swahili again, which is but this is the plural you instead of the singular you. But like yeah. No, although they use pika for cooking and then dika for writing. So yeah, I'm learning, right? All right, so narrative ka. This is common throughout NEC to mark narrative and is found in Mijigenda, Pokoma, most Swahili dialects, Pare, and many Ruvu languages. So then I chatted with him or her. But what's interesting is this, that they are showing you clearly that the African languages are pretty similar. They're like Swahili is not, or Swahili as we know it in whatever, is not like Swahili is not only just not universal, not just some created language that the Arabs gave us, but also like it has diversity within itself, but also it's similar to other African languages. You know, NEC languages in complex. There are several ways of expressing past that can be reconstructed for NEC and Shabaki. Swahili makes use of three of them: reflexes of a and the v vowel and the ile suffix. So a is found in the northern and southern Swahili dialects. Twaliteka, mai, we drew water, and so on and so forth. We came yesterday. Cheku kuya jana. So jana would be yesterday in Swahili. Tuji fuzana, we chased after each other. Safika, I have just arrived, right? Which is in the Swahili that we learn is ninafika, right? But again, the Swahili, what they did was, at least the Tanzanian Swahili, that they really formalized the language so that everything is kind of more universal. Anyway, pretty complicated. Real by Gentleman says telephone game. Yeah, studying parts of speech is dry as fuck, but it's an essential aspect of literacy. Yeah, you made it seem like it was exciting, man. His brother was in the chat yesterday, like, "Hey, I'm so grateful that you shared this article for me. Oh, it was such a good read." I'm like, this is not a good read, man. This is dry to fuck. Like, this is shit, you know. I ain't know even. Like shit, I'm about to go to bed after this one. Anyway, so but like I can't stop now. I guess I don't know. Parallel exists in Sabaki and other NEC languages. For example, NNH, Fagula, we bought far past. Wali Kubele, he had got lost. We cultivated Kwagulu, so on and so forth. Suffix occurs in SD, but not Unguja nor Standard Swahili and Comorian, with the meaning past in SD and past perfect in Comorian. The tense is marked by a copy of the root vowel in word final position, and SD by a special set of subject prefixes ku and ka for second and third person respectively. It marks positive past in SD and past perfect in Comorian, right? Okay. So, so you remember the telephone game, right? So let's see. Like, what is this guy doing? Kwenda. Oh yeah, Kwenda. Okay. So Kwende is you went, right? Kupika, you cooked. So yeah, he's just. I don't even know what he's doing at this point. Like I don't even know, but like he's showing you the link between Swahili and Comorian. Okay, so to say you'll come out or whatever is kwa, and then in Comorian it's sila, right? And then in to say you went, it's kwenda, and in Comorian it's ande, right? Or kwende and ande. So again, I usually look at it as kwenda, but it could be kwende. I don't know. So then the cook waited for me, sold, all that kind of stuff. So ile, another reconstructed for SB and Sabaki is reflexes are often attested in northern Sabaki languages, including the Lamu area dialects of Swahili, Mwini, Mwin, Ilwana, Pokomo, Mijikenda. While losing ground in modern Ndi, it is widely attested in Swahili poetry. Urgure, she who moved, you understood. You understood poetry, you never ceased. He liked Penda, right here. Past, and you've gotten old. So sometimes I can't even recognize, because I don't know how to pronounce this. Like, what is not? What is that? Theta? I don't know why it's like some random ass Greek. I don't know what that is. Or O with a line through it. I don't know. Zero. I don't know. The diachronic and synchronic morphophonemics of this suffix are interesting. Some of the Sabaki dialects have lost L, and the other I triggers stem final consonant mutations. E, for example, U, O, peace, E, he passed. So again, I don't think it's just to pronounce this O, because a lot of these words I kind of recognize without the O. He closed. So anyway, though restricted in Swahili, there are accounts that is once we present in the Mombasa area dialect. It is curious that the only Bantu languages of East Africa that do not attest to suffix are Comorian, Chifundi, and SD, including Standard Swahili. Noun class system. We can posit 17 noun classes for NEC and Sabaki languages. Swahili aligns nicely with the other Sabaki languages, and the characteristics of its noun class system match closely those of Sabaki and many NEC languages. It has lost a prefix still attested in the Comorian and Lower Pokomo, and most dialects, including Comorian, have lost the class 12 ka diminutive, but reflexes still exist in the ND and in most other Sabaki languages. Thus, the noun class system of Swahili is not atypical or unusual when viewed in the context of this matrix. Okay, right? Like, I'm starting to regret this. I don't know. I thought, I for a second, I was like, yo, this is going to be, like, shit. We're going to do a podcast on some hidden knowledge. And it's like, nah, this is dried in a motherfucker. The gentleman says, there are standardized phonetic symbols. Knowing what unusual symbol makes what sound is critical. Not that I know what they mean, but I know they mean something in context. Oh, okay. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's like a lot of these writings are... Oh, you're saying the standard. Yeah, a lot of these writings are... That's the thing about academics. They write in what they call academies, and they're writing for other academics. So a layperson like myself might who doesn't know linguistics will not can't really appreciate this book. It just seemed like it was Trigger Happy and Real Black Gentlemen were talking about this article like, oh, you know what? Like, I read it, I enjoyed it, it was really good. And it's like, the fuck? Why would you guys read this shit? This is, unless you're linguists, why are you reading this? But anyway, so if you plotted all these similarities and differences on a map, it would be clear immediately that Swahili is a language and therefore society and culture and inextricably tied with its Sabaki relatives in complex and intricate ways. A map of this sort can be found in Appendix 4. Swahili is not a simple monolithic entity. Quite the contrary, it exhibits all the richness and subtleties of a natural language that has followed normal linguistic progression and changed through time and space, that has been subject to the same socio-cultural, historical forces as its various relatives and neighbors. In just these few examples from phonology and morphology, the diversity that we find in Swahili is parallel. Shifts of PSA and the behavior of PSAG distinguish ND from Zanzibari, Pemba, and other SD. These same shifts are characteristic of parts of neighboring Sabaki languages. Other shifts, such as the aspirated, non-aspirated contrast in all of Swahili, is also manifest in major proportions of other Sabaki languages. In visualizing the isoglass map, Appendix 4, representing these facts, one should try and imagine that the map represents the result of historical forces that happened at different times and over time. The map represents strata that have temporal and spatial dimension. Such a map is not the product of a single event, but a series of events through time, and each event has its own history, sometimes opaque, sometimes not. For example, to explain the widespread attestation of aspiration in Swahili and other Sabaki languages, we have to assume that this change innovated at a time when the Swahili community and the Mujikenda and Pocomo communities were interacting in ways that allowed the shift to spread, or possibly were even part of the same immediate proto-community. Similarly, to explain a change such as PSAC in ND, but not SD in Mujikenda, Lower Pocomo, and Comorian, or the shift of PSA, F, and V to S and Z in ND and Comorian points to strong interaction among some Swahili and some Sabaki communities after the Swahili group became dialectically complex, or a time when the Swahili or the pre-Swahili had spread but were not completely distinct from their Sabaki neighbors. The behavior of PSAG suggests strong links between the Comorian community and the northern Swahili communities, but not with southern Swahili communities, but on the other hand, strengthening which SD shares with Comorian attests to links at other times. Finally, when Lenitin affects all of Mijikenda, Pocomo, and Comorian, Swahili did not participate except for a small subset of socially marginal dialects in the Vanga area, which has recently been impacted by neighboring Majikenda languages. At present, we see blending and merging. At other times, we see the opposite. From an examination of this and other... Man, I woke up way too early. I woke up like 6 a.m. From an examination of this and other data, we conclude that the connection between Swahili as a whole and other Sabaki languages on the other hand, and interactions among the various parts of Swahili on the other, is the result of a complex linguistic and socio-historical interplay that has been ongoing for centuries, the roots of which are to be found partly in the Bantu Sabaki matrix, partly within Sabaki itself, and partly within the Swahili continuum. So the decolonization hypothesis, the outlines of our critique, I do not intend to refute the M&S hypothesis point for point. However, I do want to develop the general framework of an argument. First, we need to repeat, following M&S themselves, there is no linguistic evidence, either deduced by them or any that I am aware of, that supports a hypothesis that Swahili was ever an Arabic-based pidgin. While M&S describe this early pidgin as Arabic-based lexically, they are silent about the nature of the pidgin's other components, the nature of the basilic, presumably Bantu, the only break of substrate languages in the context of decreolization. This scenario, number 3, scenario is based on a reading of the purpose of the Eritrean Sea, a document describing 2nd century East Africa. While an important document, it should not be the only basis for reconstructing Swahili history, since, importantly, it never identifies the ethnicity nor linguistic affiliation of the people inhabiting the coast at the time. In my view, an African-based pidgin is just as likely a reconstruction based on a reading of the Paraplus, but there is so little information given in that document that at best we are guessing about such matters. Further, there's a great deal more about the history of East Africa that is known and must be taken into account in doing such a reconstruction. So, man, I tell you, I'm getting I don't like academies, man. I'm getting tired. I'm not gonna hold you guys. That's not good. You shouldn't be tired while you're reading people because then they can get tired. But yeah, if somebody's like, hey man, I need to go to sleep, just tune in later and you got it. Other than citing the date of 100 AD for the presence of the Arabic-based pidgin and the speculation that the Creole developed about that same time, M&S provide little details on the chronology of the Creole continuum after the date on how this might coordinate with what we know from archaeology and other sources of historical information. M&S's area would presuppose that the Arabic merchant traders were socially dominant and or were trade initiators. This would be a socio-cultural requirement for the appearance of the Arabic-based pidgin. However, it is more likely the other way around. Cushitic speakers, Bantu speakers, Sabaki speakers, indeed pre-Swahili communities, all major players in East African history, depending on the time frame, have always been the socially and commercially dominant element in East African history, already in control of the coastal trade, the founders of coastal settlements, and the major player in all domains. In such a context, Arabic is an unlikely candidate for Creole status, let alone pidginization, because the dominant core of East African society has always been African and not Arabic. This is probably the most important part of it. Right? Let's just freaking highlight it. Just to do something exciting. Right? Just to do something exciting. Alright. Did I highlight twice? Oh, shit. Who cares? Anyway. Normal, unbroken linguistic transmissions from generation to generation would be the norm and would adhere to similar models elsewhere. South Arabian Persians and others were simply other layers superimposed on pre-existing trade associations. So M&S claim that the overwhelming evidence of an Arabic lexicon is evidence for an Arabic-based pidgin. The Arabic content of Swahili can more simply be explained by ordinary borrowing mechanisms. Okay. The overwhelming evidence of the Arabic lexicon is evidence for an Arabic-based pidgin. The Arabic content of Swahili can more simply be explained by ordinary borrowing mechanisms. We do not need to appeal to a complex hypothesis to pidginization and decolonization to explain Arabic lexis in Swahili. The major flaw in their argument is the fact that the basic core vocabulary of Swahili is Bantu in origin. All cases of X-based pidgins or Creole that have been described in the literature that I'm familiar with preserve the base or core vocabulary in the development continuum from the acrolect through decreolization. This hypothesis says nothing about the re-lexification of the core vocabulary from Arabic to Bantu in content. So basically what they're saying is that, I'll put it this way. So, we hear of this thing called AAVE, right? So it's just African American Vernacular English, okay? Basically, some people might even reason, hey, Black Americans have their own language, right? And, you could listen to blah, blah, blah. But then you get into this idea of, well, what's the base core vocabulary of African American vernacular language, English? And you'll find, the base words for, apple is going to probably be apple, or the base word for, sleep, probably going to be sleep, So the guy might be like, yeah, man, I slept, I'm going to get sleep, I'm going to sleep, or something. I don't know, right? And you might be like, well, slept and sleep are two different words, right? And then you look into it, linguistically, and you're like, oh, actually, slept is just sleep, and it looks like it might be another tense of sleep, really, but it's not a different word altogether, right? Whereas with the Swahili and the Arab, right, it's like the word for sleep is lala, right? And then maybe the Arabic word for sleep is like something else entirely, right? So that's what they're basically saying here. That essentially it doesn't seem because technically, like I said, some parts of the South, some white people, some black people are gonna sound completely like you don't know what the fuck they're saying, right? And technically over time they are speaking a different language, But if you look at it, you could say it's a creolization of English. You get what I'm saying? It's a creolization of English in the sense that, kind of like Jamaica, like patois, like Jamaica, it's English, but you could say it's its own, Jamaican language, right? But it's really just English, spoken differently. So anyway, as opposed to this, where it's it's not Arabic. Swahili is not Arabic. It's a Bantu language that borrows a lot of Arabic words. or yeah, a significant number, like 10% of its, or like 50% of its foreign words are Arabic, but its foreign words are like 22% of its language. You know, which is significant, but not, you know, whatever. So the MNS explain away the lack of an Arabic grammar element in the hypothetical Creole by claiming that the grammar of the Creole was based predominantly on primary universal patterns. In all cases of well-documented Creole, there is no Creole which does not exhibit morphological and syntactical elements from the acrolect. If X-based pidgins are lexically oriented in a certain direction, we can expect there to be morphological and grammatical elements from the same source. Creole simply does not develop only in terms of primary universal patterns. The literature is fairly clear on this point, and we don't see a simple transference of features from acrolect to basilex. So, you know, long story short, like, because even you might say, because some people say that, you know, African American vernacular English has a grammar similar to African languages, you know? But then that's when it becomes like, you got to sit down and study, honestly. But I mean, I don't think anybody should make the case that they aren't, you know, English. You know, I wouldn't make that case. Although yeah. So anyway, the predominantly culturally oriented nature of Arabic lexis in Swahili can more easily be explained by normal borrowing transfer mechanisms. While there is a relatively large amount of Arabic lexis, none of the Arabic morphological apparatus that was borrowed, along with lexical terms, is productive. The ma, mi, and mu elements of Arabic loans is productive, and moreover have been re-lexified in terms of Bantu Sabaki morphological structures. Furthermore, the frequency of Arabic vocabulary in present-day written Swahili corresponds to a continuum of literary type ranging from informal textual material of a journalistic character through modern text, novels, short stories, translations, to ancient text, poetry, epics with Arabic or Islamic themes. The highest percentage of loans from Arabic are found in the later categories and the lowest in journalistic text. So there's like, they borrow a lot of Arabic words when they're writing Arabic stories. You get what I'm saying? But when they're writing about journalism, like journalistic stuff, they're not really borrowing from Arabic terms. So we say that it's very Arabicized, but we say that because we're looking at a lot of what they produce, like basically a lot of the Islamic texts that they produce, because there's a lot of Muslims there, too. Like Tanzania is like 50% Muslim and 50% Christian, more or less. You know what I mean? So it's like, you know, yeah, you're also gonna find a lot of, you know, Christian, like English terms. You get what I'm saying? Like you're gonna find a lot of English terms from the Christians, a lot of Arabic terms from the Muslims. Yeah, makes sense. Relation is a characteristic of loaning. And so that's another thing, too, to remember that, like, when we talk about, oh, you shouldn't be, you know, you shouldn't have Arabic words and you shouldn't have English words. It's like, well, yeah, but you're a Christian and you're a Muslim. You know what I mean? And the Christians and the Muslims are English and Arabic at this point. You know? And really, like, Italian for the Christians, but it is what it is. So the MNS, and that's like if you're, like, Catholic. Like, the Protestants, I don't remember where the Protestant movement's from, but like the King of England was pretty big on the Protestant movement, and in fact, King James was an English king. You know what I mean? So one of the popular versions of the Bible that a lot of people, like the Americans, would spread are these people are English, like the English version. So and I don't know if the French have their own Bible. I don't know. I don't know if they use the King James. I don't know if the French use, but probably not, because you know what I mean. Like it's but I don't know what the name of their version. So in Bertoccioni's study of frequency in Swahili lexis, her results shows that 50% of 100 most frequently used words are Oriental in origin. The percentage goes up to about 37% in the 1,000 most frequently used set of vocabulary. Her study was based on a list of 1,143 entries taken from a count of 40,000 occurrences in 100 sources. So she's saying that, so somebody, let's see, this was footnote 15. Footnote 15, where was that? I don't see it. But basically what right here. She said the highest percentage of loans from Arabic are found in the latter category. So she's looking at 100 sources and saying, well, what are the words? Now, we don't know what these sources were, but let's say of the 100 sources, 50 of them were books that, like Islamic themed books, right? Then you're going to come up with a lot more Arabic words. And that's the thing about studies. Another thing we got to realize is that studies are always biased. They're always constructed. They're always just really biased. Like if I were to tell you what's the most common word in black nationalist books, right? And then I said, well, for my study, I'm going to look into, 10 books. What 10 books? Like if I use 10 books and then you use 10 different books, and then somebody else uses 10 different books, right? We're not going to come to the same conclusions, right? But what happens is that in the field of science, you'll have somebody say, I use 10 books, and then based off of that, whatever conclusion they come up with, we'll say, oh, that's the universal, and it's like it makes a little bit of sense, the way how it makes a little bit of sense is that in statistics, they say depending on the size of your sample, you could make a conclusion. But again, this is where it gets a little bit more confusing because from 100 sources, right? Like if you go to statistical mechanics or you go to statistics, from 100 sources, your error, like you can calculate the size of your error based off of how many sources you have. And basically in statistics, something like 100 sources would have a error margin of like 15%. You know what I mean? Or even probably more. I don't know the math off the top of my head. But long story short, you really wouldn't have any sort of you couldn't claim a scientific conclusion off of a sample size of 100. You couldn't get a scientific conclusion from a sample size of 100. In statistics, but here, like in a social science, you could. So like if you're doing a survey, and you say I surveyed 100 people, you would say that the again, it depends on. Oh no, sorry. It's not so much that it's only because you have 100 sources. It depends on how many sources in total there are, right? So I don't know. Maybe I could just quickly ask ChatGPT. I kind of wanted to not do any sort of tangents because I'd rather finish this stupid book. But maybe I could ask ChatGPT to do the math for me real quick. But it's like, what if I take 100 books, what is the calculation for error if there are let's say 20,000 books or 200,000 books, right? And I don't know. I'm not really making much sense. So he says to calculate the error of certainty, so of a sampling books, we need to clarify what kind of error you're interested in. So I was just kind of waiting for I just want to find the term of see if this person's gonna say anything. Yeah. Okay. So he doesn't know. Standard, yeah. So you basically have to have a standard error. Oh no, yeah. So, like I said, I used to do this in See, I kind of want to show you guys the screen, but I can't because some of this stuff is like proprietary. Wait, let me see. Yeah, I kind of wish I could. How do you do this? So what I'll do, I'll copy and paste it somewhere. Right now the computer is analyzing, and then he's going to analyze a bit more. No, I think he did the math wrong, so don't worry about it. So one of the troubles with ChatGPT is like it's a language model, and so it's not going to... the standard error for a population of 20,000 books is approximately 0.0299, and the standard error for the other one, so it's like it doesn't understand what's being asked, which is okay, because it's like it's the same damn number for 20,000 and 200,000. So anyway, I'll just leave it alone. But basically, long story short, is that if there were 20,000 books that you could choose from, and you chose only 100, versus if there were 200,000 books and you chose only 100, And of course, we're not even saying that there's books because they already mentioned there were journalistic sources and there were Arabic epics, right? So the Arabic epics are going to be much bigger than the journalistic article, right? Because you're not writing a lot of these a lot of these classical epics, like some of them could be like 800 pages. You know what I mean? And then you're going to say what's the most common word in this 800-page book versus what's the most common word in this 4-page this 4-paragraph article, right? And whatever, the book is going to be more biased. You're not, so it's a lot of it is take into account not taking into account that that reality in a sense. But anyway, let's continue because I didn't even show you guys the screen, so it is what it is. He says MNS cite the presence of massive numbers of Arabic loans in Swahili as evidence of an earlier Arabic-based pidgin. However, most loans date from relatively recent times, long after Swahili attained its present form and structure. Only a very small part of the material can be dated earlier, and the material can be explained by normal borrowing. But again, it is, it's true, and I agree with this theme that he's saying that it's not necessarily Arab, but this is not the best argument because, like he said, somebody once upon a time did say, oh shit, they're speaking Arabic, or it sounds like they're speaking Arabic. But, of course, that person probably not a linguist either, so it is what it is. In MNS, see a reduced noun class system in Swahili. Kind of like, I can put it this way, in fact. So the Gullah Geechee, you would think, oh, are they speaking Jamaican? Are they speaking Patois? And they're not. You know what I mean? But they would sound similar to, Jamaican Patois, but that's pretty much the extent of it. So if somebody, like I said, if you, like 1,000 years ago or 2,000 years ago, somebody traveling to the Gullah Geechee, if that were a thing 2,000 years ago, or even let's say 2,000 years from now, somebody travels to I don't know how to put it, but basically somebody goes to the Gullah Geechee from Jamaica and they're like, oh wow, you guys sound like you're speaking Jamaican, or you sound like you're speaking a Jamaican dialect, and it's like, no, it's not where it came from. You know what I mean? And the Gullah Geechee and the Jamaican sound similar, partly because they're both African people who are using English, in a kind of Africanized way. So MNS see a reduced non-class system in Swahili and the loss of tonal distinctiveness as best explained by their hypothesis. However, the Swahili noun-class system is virtually identical to the Sabaki and NEC system. The loss of tonal distinctiveness is an areal phenomenon related to the general areal shift throughout Eastern Bantu involving the shift of pure tone systems to a pitch accent systems. These aspects of Swahili grammars can best and most simply be viewed as spontaneous change, and we need not appeal to decreolization of an Arabic pidgin to explain them. If creolization If creolization from an Arabic pidgin played any role in the development of Swahili, then we would see significant chunks of Arabic structure along with Bantu chunks making up Swahili. Other than some prepositions and conjunctions, which again can be explained by normal lexical borrowing, we don't find structural evidence of such a sort. Swahili, as seen above, is a structurally complex Bantu language that fits in with the matrix in equally complex ways that cannot be simply explained away by a decreolization process. Swahili shows a complex interplay of features with other languages of the area. Some of these may have been generated into non-Swahili communities and spread into Swahili, and others have been generated in Swahili and radiated out to others. And some Sabaki processes have only marginally or non-uniformly affected Swahili. Such complex dialectical facts cannot be explained by a simple decreolization process. A more appropriate model or set of models are normal generation by generation historical changes, areal change, socio-linguistic interaction, and borrowing. Himes has remarked that pidginization and creolization represent the extreme to which social factors can go in shaping the transmission and use of language. In our case here, extreme explanations throw little light on the question of Swahili origin. While Arab traders were usually present on the East African coast, what is the evidence that they ever constituted more than a handful of adventurers, settlers, or traders in the time of Periplus? It was only in the late centuries of the current era that we can speak of Arab suzerainty on the coast, much too late to help support the hypothesis. So he's like, look, there were Arab traders, but who's to say they weren't just a handful of adventurers, settlers, and traders? Like, why is it that they would have created a whole language? Thus, we social conditions Thus were social conditions present for the development of an Arabic-based pidgin in the early century of the first millennium? Not likely. Nor could Islam have been a factor at the time of Periplus. The first mosque only began to appear around 1000 AD, at about the time the earliest pre-Swahili communities were developing. Even proposing the development of an Arabic-based pidgin, what we know of the development of the Creole continuum elsewhere would predict creolization in the direction of the acrolect and not the basilect. If Nurse argues in their history of the if, as Nurse and Spear argue in their history of the Swahili, that the coastal dwelling Sabaki-speaking population from which the nascent pre-Swahilian, then identifiable Swahili communities developed, were already engaged in trade, even assuming Arabic participation, social conditions would have presupposed the development of a Sabaki-based pidgin, not an Arabic-based pidgin. So you would say it's Sabaki-based pidgin, not Arabic. Modern or pre-modern cases of Arab or other settlements on the coast that we know more about are the Omanis, Mazruis, and Nabinis, and even earlier the Shizari. All were linguistically absorbed into pre-existing Swahili communities. None of these communities exercised the linguistic dominance to prevent absorption, let alone provide the conditions for the development of an Arabic-based pidgin. Arabic speakers learned the local dialects and were absorbed. Why would the earlier times about which we know considerably less call for a different model? Other modern models are equally enlightening. English-African interaction in East Africa produced Swahili-based pidgins, as did Indian-African interactions, not English-based nor Hindi-based pidgins. Even assuming an early Arabic-based pidgin, it could not have been long-lived and disappeared as it was aborning, and surely could have played no role in explaining what kind of language Swahili is today. So that's pretty much it. These are the references. I think you mentioned an appendix. Okay, so the appendix 1 is the text from Thing, and then this is the Sabaki language, and this is appendix 3, which is the I don't know what this is, the noun class system. So appendix 4 is a selection of Swahili and Sabaki eco-glasses. So I think, I don't know if the passage might be interesting, but this right here, what is this? Sabaki languages. So this is all the Sabaki languages. There's Comorian from the Comoro Islands. There's Swahili, and there's different dialects of Swahili. And then there's these, so on and so forth. So I guess this is the only interesting one, which is basically the passage from the ancient Greek person. So they say, and look, Azania, that's a name for South Africa. So it's pretty interesting, right? So he says, beyond Opon, the shore trending more towards the south, first there are small and great bluffs of Azania, right? Southern Africa. This coast is destitute of harbors, but there are places where ships can lie at anchor, the shore being abrupt, and this course is of 6 days, the direction being southwest. Then come the small and great beach for another 6 days course, and after that, in order, the courses of Azania, the first being called Sarapian, and the next Nikon, and after that, several rivers and other anchorages, one after the other, separately at rest, and a run for each day, 7 in all, until the Pyrelas Island and what is called the Channel, beyond which, a little to the south of southwest, after 2 courses of a day and night along the Authentic coast, is the island of Menithus, about 300 stadia from the mainland, low and wooded, in which there are rivers and many kinds of birds and the mountain tortoise. So this could be Zanzibar. I don't know. There are no wild beasts except the crocodile, but they do not attack men. In this place there are sewed boats and canoes hollowed from thin logs, which they use for fishing and catching tortoises. In the island they also catch them in the peculiar way in whisker baskets, which they fasten across the channel opening between the breakers. So again, like I said, they might not have been using fishing nets. They could have just been using baskets. You see what I'm saying? These 2 days sail beyond, there lies the very last market town of the continent of Azania, which is called Rapta, which is its name from the sewed boats, Rapta Napoleon, already mentioned, in which there is the ivory in great quantity, and tortoise shells. Along the coast live men of piratical habits. So there's men at the coast, probably the Arabs, right? Very great is that right? They're Arab. Right? First, very great in stature, and under separate chiefs of each place. The Maraphitic chief governs it under some ancient right, that subjects is to the sovereignty of the state that is to become first in Arabia. What? So the Meretic chief governs it under some ancient right that subjects it to the sovereignty of the state that is become first in Arabia. So I'm guessing you said that there's like an Arab town, possibly. I mean, I don't know. Because the guy just said that there probably wasn't any Arab towns, so I'm just a little confused. And the people of Muza now hold it under his authority, and send thither many large ships using Arab captains and agents who are familiar with the natives and intermarry with them, and who know the whole coast and understand the language. So again, you have, like I said, there was intermarriage, even in ancient times. There are, and again, this is something that I want people to realize, that nobody's afraid of genetic annihilation. Like, get that out of your head. Nobody's afraid of genetic annihilation. There are imported into these markets the lances made at Muza, especially for this trade in hatchets and daggers and awls and various kinds of glass, and at some places a little wine and wheat, not for trade, but to serve for getting the goodwill of the savages. So again, it looks like they're calling, maybe it's possibly some of, well, I don't know. Oh, wait, sorry. Wine and wheat, right? But, so they're giving you food and drinks to, like, I'm guessing you're going to be the savage in this situation, but you get what I'm saying. There are exported from these places at a great quantity of ivory, but inferior to that of Adulis and rhinoceros horn and tortoiseshell, which is the best demand after that from India, and a little palm oil. And these markets of Azania are the very last of the continent that stretches down to the right hand from Berenice, for beyond these places the unexplored ocean curves around towards the west, and running along by the region of the south of Ethiopia and Libya and Africa, it mingles with the Western Sea. So according to Shof, courses of Azania are strips of desert coast extending below the equator. Sarapan may be the modern Mogadishu. So I don't remember where Mogadishu is. I feel like it's Kenya. I'm not sure. Nikon is perhaps the modern Barawa. Rivers and anchorages refers to the modern El Diraj or coast of islands. Pirale, so he's giving the what these were. Pirale Islands are evidently Pata, Manda, and Lamu. Authentic coast is Asan, was a district of Kataban in Saudi Arabia. So I think he was actually talking about an Arab world. Manuthis, the first island south of Manda, is Pemba, but the topographical description is perhaps truer to Zanzibar, and the name seems perpetuated in the modern mafia. So there's mafia and there's Zanzibar. But you also see how language changes. So it used to be Monifia, and then it became mafia. And people are there in, because he mentioned mafia a couple of times, and yeah, like even the name of their country will change over time. Schaff thinks this part of the text is corrupt with the whole passage missing. Rafta, the identification depends on the identity of Menethus, thus it might be Pangi, Bagamoyo. So Bagamoyo was somewhere I actually went in Tanzania, or Kilwa. Musa, I think Kilwa's in Tanzania too. Musa, a town of modern Yemen on the Red Coast Sea, so that's in the Arabic world. Adulas is the modern town of Masuna, Eritrea, Berenice, southern Egyptian town, now apparently in ruins just north of the Sudanese border of the Red Sea. McCrindle's translation of the last several lines of the 16 are: the whole territory is governed by the despot of Morphatis, because the sovereignty over it, by some right of old standing, is vested in the kingdom of what is called the First Arabia. The merchants of Moza farm its revenue from the king, and employ in trading with a great many ships of heavy burden, on board of which the heavy Arabian commanders and factors who are intimately acquainted with the natives and have contracted marriage with them and know their language and the navigation of the coast. So that's pretty much it. All right, fam, that's pretty much it. That's the podcast. That was low-key longer than I expected. But appreciate everybody who stuck through. What the fuck? Did the thing disappear? Appreciate everybody who stuck through. And of course, until next time, I appreciate you guys. And of course, Shem Hotep, Onku Ja, Seneb Neb, Amen Ma'at, Dua, Netcher. Whew.